Hello, and welcome to Back Through the Lens, where two film school friends talk about movies through the haze of nostalgia, the good, the bad, and the ones that aren't quite how we remember them. I'm your host, Rachel, and with me is my co host, Joe. This is our St. Patrick's Day episode.
Top of the morning to you, Rachel.
I didn't expect that, but I feel like I should have.
Got him. I was debating on doing it in a really Lucky Charm accent, but I decided not to in case we keep it.
Jesus.
Gotta start off the episode right.
Yeah, and that was it, I guess. So I feel like St. Patrick's Day is kind of a big deal in Cleveland.
Yeah, from my understanding, it is one of the biggest celebrations for that holiday across the country. Us, New York, and I think Savannah. We're the only few cities that actually have the parade on the day of, despite the day of the week. So this year will be Monday.
Oh, I
Cleveland
see.
is stubborn, and they'll do it whatever day it falls on.
Okay. I actually didn't realize that.
Oh yeah,
Um, I do know that when my husband and I lived in Lakewood and he would take the Rapid into work at Case, he would not come in on St. Patrick's Day because it was so horrible, like doing the Tower City stop downtown.
oh I can believe
Um,
that.
yeah, they would set up like trash bags on the train. Yeah, I feel like we don't really do too much for St. Patrick's Day. We'll make like corned beef and potatoes.
Usually work because yeah,
Yeah.
but we do have we kind of call it kegs and eggs or like an Irish tailgate. But we will go visit. A handful of us will visit our friend that passed away, a very Irish friend, and we'll go to his gravesite. And I will make breakfast burritos and coffee, and my one
Mhm.
friend blasts Irish music at the gravesite, and we kind of tailgate for a while until I usually have to go to work, and they'll go to mass.
That's really nice. I like that. It's kind of like an Irish Day of the Dead. I like it.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to start with my pick. It is The Quiet Man, directed by John Ford, released August 21st, 1952. It is unrated, I believe.
I couldn't find a rating.
Okay. It is based on the short story The Quiet Man by Maurice Walsh.
Did they have ratings back in '52? I don't remember now.
I don't know. I'm going to
It's
look it
like
up now.
G and that's it. I think right.
G and not for children. I don't know.
Yeah, this man smokes and punches people. It's not rated G.
Probably was, though.
Take your kids. It's great.
Take your kids. It's great. Unrated, as far as we can tell. All right. So, The Quiet Man. For those who don't know, it's about an American man, Sean Thornton, played by John Wayne. He moves back to his family's hometown in Ireland, falls in love with an Irish woman who happens to be his new neighbor. Problems ensue because the woman's brother hates him and Sean doesn't understand their weird Irish customs for marriage and family. So the first time I saw The Quiet Man, I know it was on Turner Classic Movies. They always had commercials for it for some reason. It must have been a really big part of their catalog. The movie opens with, well, first of all, I would like to point out we have another old school like film intro with the credits in the beginning. Just funny to me that I think The Apartment was probably the first movie we watched for this that had that sort of older intro.
Yeah, I think up until this episode, that was the oldest film one of us picked.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think.
Oh, no, wait, no, Wizard of Oz.
Oh, episode 1.
What's wrong with you?
Been a long season.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I just constantly remember seeing it like, I mean, you know how like older commercials would be or older movie previews, they would be like the thrilling romance between John Ford and Maureen O'Hara, and they'd talk a lot. They would really hype up the Irish stuff, talk about her being a redhead. It was very silly, but I think I just eventually had seen so many commercials for it that I was like, yeah, sure, I'll watch this one sometime. And obviously, John Wayne is a big name. John Ford, the director, is kind of like one of those directors that has gone down in history as kind of like a classic, more so for Westerns.
Yes,
This I feel like this maybe was an outlier for him, but I couldn't say that for sure.
it
Uh,
definitely feels like an Irish Western, though. At least
that's
the
fair.
cinematography does to me.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm sure that TMC probably promoted a lot because I believe it won a few Oscars, but also was nominated for a handful as well, I believe.
Mhm.
This was my first time seeing it. Here we go.
I'm not surprised. We're immediately introduced to John Wayne's character when the movie starts. Sean Thornton. We have a narrator telling us he doesn't look like a typical American tourist. He has just stepped off a train in Ireland. Everything's kind of shrouded in mystery. No one's really explaining anything to us. Even the narrator doesn't know.
What the credits before the movie and the music, it definitely speaks of a time. And even if I've never seen this movie before, just like The Apartment, it brings me to my childhood when I used to watch old movies on TV. And I like that when Sean steps off the train, the narrator, who I was like, well, if Sean's not narrating it, who is? We'll find out
Mhm.
later. He's like, yeah, he's not a typical American tourist. There's no camera in sight or a fishing pole. Like,
Yeah,
what kind of stereotype are we got here?
apparently Americans come to Ireland to fish, which is something that other people mention about fishing. So
Hmm.
that must have been the big tourism draw. When I was looking this up on IMDb, I realized this actually takes place in the 1920s.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that at first, or I didn't remember it. Did you? Does anyone ever mention that in the movie? Like, did you catch that?
I don't know. I don't think they mention it. They do have a little bit of an older era vibe, which is hard to pick out as a first time viewer watching a movie from the 60s, but they're
Hmm.
not dressed as 60s. They're definitely a little older. When we get to his family plot
Hmm.
and how everyone dresses, it does kind of give me Irish Little House on the Prairie vibes.
Hmm.
So I guess in retrospect, I can kind of maybe subconsciously thought it was older than the 60s, but I don't specifically didn't pin down the 20s.
Yeah, at first I kept thinking they were just like this small rural town, which we will get into like when he's picked up from the train station. It's like a horse and buggy, and I was like, I don't know. I guess they're really stuck in the past. And then I realized because it was the past. But I'm kind of glad you didn't pick up on the exact date either, because I just don't remember ever being told it was the 1920s. That's all. John Wayne gets off this train. He's trying to figure out where he needs to go to get to the town of Innisfree. And I like you made a note here that everyone is crowding around him, telling him how not to get there.
I've been to Ireland once. I went to a smaller town. Well, I guess in comparison to like a Dublin.
Mm.
And I didn't have to ask for directions, but if I did, I feel like this would happen. And everyone is right about which way to go, and they're all the wrong way because someone else's way is better. And they surround this man who is, yeah, he's like 15 feet taller than everybody, it seems like.
Yeah. It also felt very Midwestern to me. Like all these people are just like, who's this new guy? Like very
Hmm.
small town. Like, who's this new guy? Where's he going? Oh, we'll help him out. And then their ways of helping him out is, you see that road? Yeah. Okay, don't take that road. Eventually, someone kind of comes in and rescues him, takes his bag, and offers to drive him in his horse and buggy.
Yeah, he just comes up and takes it and walks away without saying anything. And Sean just follows him because, well, he took his stuff, rightfully so.
Been so long since I've seen this, I thought that it was robbing him. I didn't know what was happening. Um,
Robbing him in like almost a tuxedo, like his little like carriage get up.
I know. He's riding on this horse and buggy, smoking like you do because you're John Wayne in an old movie, I guess.
I never smoked cigarettes, but if I did, I'd want to be as cool looking as John Wayne.
You see certain actors in certain movies, and you're like, damn, that looks cool.
No, I'm going to start at 40 smoking cigarettes.
I do really enjoy John Wayne as an actor and like his screen presence. There is problematic stuff about him that we have since learned. There's some weird, like, macho stuff that gets tacked onto his image, probably from, being in all the Westerns, but I liked him as a leading man in this. I liked him with Maureen O'Hara. I think they're a really good screen couple, and I honestly think I might have seen this before I saw any of his Westerns, so I didn't even have the image of, like, Western action hero John Wayne in my head when I first saw this. So we learn while Sean is smoking in this carriage that he's from Pittsburgh. And I just think it's funny that now we have like two Pittsburgh references this season between this and
S-
Groundhog Day.
So I thought that at first. I even wrote in my notes, he's from Pittsburgh. I don't like him now. We find out 2 hours and 40 minutes later that it is not the Pittsburgh you think. And I actually had to look this up because I was like, wait a minute, this exists? He's from Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, which I didn't know
it
was a thing, but it is.
This bothered me so much because they do mention later that he's from Pittsburgh, Massachusetts. But in this beginning scene where he says he's from Pittsburgh, they talk a lot about steel. And
Right.
like, obviously, you're going to think he's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
because they also say something about Cincinnati. Like, that's where I think the guy guesses he's from. No one was thinking Pittsburgh, Massachusetts during this
I
exchange.
never even heard of it till he said it in the movie.
To the point where I'm almost, like, wondering if that was a goof in their script or the way the actor said the line later, I don't know, but
Oh, maybe.
it makes 0 sense, and I know that's such a tiny, little, nitpicky thing, but it, like, almost made me mad when he said Massachusetts because 'cause I'm like, "There's no way." Like,
Yeah,
"Why
that
were you
was.
talking about steel?" No. This man is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that's the hill I'm gonna die on. But it turns out that Sean was born here in Ireland. He wants to buy back his family's old estate, live the rest of his life here. We hear a different narrator now, and it sounds like maybe Sean is remembering the way his mom used to talk about this town and like asking him if he remembers being here. I don't know, just kind of Sean reminiscing while he's on this buggy ride and, sees his childhood home for the first time. This is also where he says he's been fed steel in Pittsburgh, which I wrote makes sense.
Oh, is that because that's a reference to Flynn, the driver? He's like,
Mhm.
what are you, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", and he's whatever his height is. He tells him, and he's like, oh yeah, they feed me steel because that's
Mhm.
he's making a joke how big he is.
But like you don't really know what's going on at first because we don't know who the first
No,
narrator is, and then there's just like this woman narrator suddenly. This was a literal narration when he's hearing his mom's voice, but as someone who had never seen this movie or doesn't remember this movie, it sounds like suddenly we just have a new person, like, leading us through.
yeah, the first 10 minutes of so of the movie, there's a lot of what is going on.
And who is actually talking to us, yeah.
Yeah,
But then it turns out that this buggy driver knows Sean. He remembers him as a kid. I
yeah,
don't
because he's like, oh, you're so big now. I remember you when you were this big.
I think it comes up because the driver's like, "Why would you want this, like, little cottage?" Like, it's because it does look very rundown, like you said, kinda Little House on the Prairie, Ireland, and sh I think that's when Sean mentions he was born here and they realize they know each other. So now we cut to the priest, Father Lonergan. It turns out he's the narrator. I found this scene so funny, and it's such an old movie thing because the narration, as the priest is walking down the lane, says, "Now then, here comes myself. That's me there, walking, that tall, saintly looking man. Here comes me. I'm walking down the lane." That's such an old movie thing, so that, like, he's the narrator.
I mean, that's the only reason how I knew it was him.
So we learned through Sean's discussion with Father Lonergan that all his family's passed, his parents are gone, his grandfather was in a penal colony in Australia. They seem fine with this fact, though. I mean, to be fair, his grandfather maybe wasn't a bad guy. Maybe he just got a raw deal and got shipped off to Australia, but everyone's just like, yep. So while the priest is speaking to the man driving the carriage that Sean's riding in, we get our first look at Mary Kate, the
Hmm.
leading lady.
From a distance, she is herding some sheep, as
Mhm.
one does in Ireland. Sean gets a good stare at her. She's got red hair and sheep. Every Irish lad's dream, right?
She's
Um,
got red hair and sheep. Oh my god. They do really make her stand out. Like everything about this scenery is very green, which I
hmm.
guess tracks.
Except for her
Except for
hair.
her hair, right,
Yeah.
she's wearing blue with, like, a red skirt, she has a red
Hmm.
hair. They're definitely making her stand out. All the men are wearing, like, neutral browns, so it would be hard not to notice Mary Kate in general.
And that shot they introduce her is awesome. It's almost
Mhm.
like canted in a way.
Mhm.
Like she looks like she's going uphill, and she
Mhm.
turns around and sees Sean kind of staring at her, and her face is like fierce. It's
Mhm.
just like very strong looking,
Yeah.
and in a close up, and they go back to Sean, and she turns around, and it's almost like love at first sight. It seems like for Sean.
Yeah, I would say that. She definitely stares back, but it might be more so because I assume everyone in this village knows each other and she realizes
Hmm.
he's new. Yeah, I have a note. Like you mentioned the canted angle. They shoot her at like an upward angle for her close-ups, and it made me think of how they introduced Commodus and Gladiator.
Then Sean mentions this woman, like who's this beautiful woman I saw, and then Flynn says, "Oh, it's just a mirage brought on by your terrible thirst." And I couldn't tell if that was a joke I wasn't getting, if he was trying to ignore this woman in the field, if he was suggesting that they need a bit of whiskey. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I get the joke about like needing water in the desert and you have mirages, but I also assumed it was like a we need to get a beard kind of a joke
Hmm.
because we're in Ireland.
Well, also Flynn drinks a lot. He might have a problem.
Yes. Yeah, Flynn. Yes. Flynn has a problem.
We'll get to that. Also, Flynn, the town alcoholic, but also the only one that drives.
That's an excellent point.
I guess when he's driving, everyone stays off the road, huh?
Alcoholism is like a funny thing in older movies. So that's where we are with this. We cut to Sean and Mary Kate at church. Mary Kate leaves the church and she goes to like dip her hand in the holy water and, cross herself. And Sean ends up cupping the holy water in his hands for her so that she has to dip her hand into his hands. And I don't know, I'm not Catholic. That just seems like a faux pas on his part.
Just seems all sorts of weird. I don't know.
Yeah, and the driver kinda I think it's the driver that gives him a hard time about it, Flynn, and
Yeah.
he's, like, defending himself, and I'm like, "I don't know, I think I would've found that weird too."
I think what the film is doing here is setting up all the things Sean's going to get wrong as far as I'm an American in Ireland.
Yes.
I think that was just a weird way to start about doing it.
For me, it's less about whatever customs he might be breaking in this country, it's more like, I don't know why he would get in the way of her, like, religious ritual like that. It just seemed odd. But this was his way to kind of introduce himself, say a couple words to her. Seems like he could have just stopped her outside of church without the holy water involved, but, whatever.
Yeah, I think an opening there would be like, "Hey, I like your sheep."
I noticed your red hair and red skirt.
Yeah, I didn't know they
Um,
had color in this country. Thank you.
I didn't know they had a color besides green.
But after this, he gets in this carriage, and Flynn's like, "You need to ignore this woman. Like, it's not for you, sir."
And he says, she might have freckles and a temper, but she's also really poor. Sean goes to this rich widow who currently owns the land that his childhood home is on. He goes to make a case to buy it back. I guess it's okay because she's a nice kind of rich. They keep hammering that home that she does a lot of like charity work and gives back to the poor a lot. So we learn from Sean explaining his situation to this rich widow that life in America was really tough. He and his mom didn't have much. His dad died when he was young, and he really latched on to his mom's stories of Innisfree as this quaint, beautiful place that they would have had this like nice, quiet life in, I think. We don't get too much detail about him though. We hear him say that he quit something, but he quickly changes the subject, corrects himself. So we get the impression that he's hiding some more detail about his life. I think it's fair for him to assume that like no one in Ireland was going to figure it out
Yeah,
cuz
he's clearly running away from something.
right, yes. He is speaking to this widow trying to buy his home back. She's questioning him. I think she's unsure because he's American and she's like, why should I sell this to someone who isn't even Irish, who doesn't even have ties. I don't know what you're gonna do. You're gonna open like a B&B or something. We enter Squire Will. He's called both Squire and Will, like interchangeably. Um,
Well, the squire is, I think, a title he bestowed himself because he has land. So the guy addressing him as he enters is Will Denneher, and from behind him, we can't see him yet. There's like a grumbling. He's like, "Oh, sorry, Squire Will Denneher." So I feel like
okay.
he might not be an official squire, but demands that he has this title. He does have people that work for him on his land and etc. So I don't know. I'm a big man and I have land and I want people to
Mhm.
respect me and I bully everyone around.
Mhm. Yes.
He's like the Gaston of this movie.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. So Squire, stumbles in, starts complaining because he had wanted to buy this property for a while, apparently. And I guess he had been making offers that the widow wasn't accepting, but then she gets upset with him because he had been speaking about her at the pub. Like, that's how we found out that Sean was here trying to buy it from her. And she gets so mad about him talking about her at the pub that she sells it to Sean.
Yeah, write that in there.
Yeah, right, that after this guy's been trying to buy it for, like, years.
Don't go to the pub and run your mouth. It's going to get you in trouble.
So we cut to the Danaher home. Mary Kate's there feeding everyone. So, surprise, Squire Will is Kate's brother. He stumbles in. Everyone that she had been feeding at the table is already talking about Sean being in town. This Americans here bought that neighboring house. So I guess, like you said, this family has land and they have people who work the land. That's who Kate is feeding. Mary Kate is feeding. Will storms in. He's angry because he lost his property. Immediately starts drinking and yells at everyone to go back to work.
Oh, yeah, they don't even get to eat. He just
Yeah.
comes in, like, everyone get back to work. And he sits down in his chair and starts pouring whiskey into a coffee mug. And even Mary Kate's like, it's a little bit early, don't you think?
Yep.
And then he's got this one worker that seems to be, I don't know, I'm going to call him an ass kisser. And he's always hanging around him, but also apparently has his book. Everything goes in his book. So when Sean bought the land, he told his little lackey, put his name in the book. So it's kind of like an IOU black book type thing.
Yeah.
I feel like it comes up a couple times when he gets angry. He threatens to put people in his book, like he's some sort of, I don't know, hard ass or something.
Yeah, like he's keeping tabs on like who's wronged him. Nothing really comes of this.
No,
I just
it,
realized that.
it's just a way to be threatening and hold shit over someone's head.
But I got the impression from this scene that Mary Kate maybe does not love her life. She's just surrounded by all these like loud drunk men, and her brother seems like a real hard ass. And I don't know, all she does is cook and clean, but then he doesn't even let the workers like eat what she's made them. So what is she really doing?
At one point, when the workers before they get shooed away, they are talking about Sean and how he was able to buy that property. She like looks longingly at it from the window.
Hmm.
It's in a cool frame shot, and the cottage is off in the distance. Through the window, you can see that, and she's just kind of staring at it. We don't really see her face, but I don't know. You can feel that she's
Hmm.
maybe dreaming of getting out of here.
And with how close it is to their home, I assume the reason her brother wanted that land so badly was just like to expand their own
Yeah.
land. I guess that is what you needed back then, just land. You needed to have as much land as possible.
Well, we see that they farm a little bit at least. They have the sheep.
Hmm.
We know that much. Man, that's probably how they can get by though.
Right, yes.
So you either have money or you have land.
And as far as we know, from what Flynn told us, these people don't have money. They're very poor.
Right.
So,
Well, that's going on though. Sean is waiting for his driver
hmm.
to take him back to his little cottage after he buys it. So he
Hmm.
hasn't even been there yet, at least not since he was a child. And he stops in the local pub, and no one wants to talk to him. He's trying to give some pleasantries. He's like says hello to everybody because he's new in town, and he literally is
Hmm.
now a townie, or he
Hmm.
will become one.
Yeah.
And everyone's just giving him the cold shoulder. And he offers to buy a round for the whole bar, and everyone's like, "Well, I don't know if I really want to drink." And he kind of slowly talks to this old guy with father time looking beard
Yeah.
and starts he's like, well, what's your name? And he tells him his name. He's like, oh, were you this person's son? Yes. That means you're this person's grandson. We all loved your granddad. Everyone drink a beer. And now he is beloved by everybody because of his granddad, who's also named Sean.
Right. Well, and they're cool with him because they realize they, like, knew his family. He really did come from that town, not just, like, a completely random American who came and bought some land there. This was so funny to me, though, because in my notes, I wrote, "He seems pretty social and outgoing, not really quiet." We will learn later why they refer to him as quiet. But also some of these people in the bar, like, going through Sean's sleeping bag. But
Yeah,
Sean has, like, a sleeping bag and, like, one piece of luggage, like, this is all he has with him.
it was these younger guys and Flynn. Like I think
Mhm,
Flynn. It was weird because Flynn was explaining them what a he called it a sleeper bag. He's like, this is his
mhm,
sleeper bag, and he sleeps in it. And
mhm.
he, I think they don't show him go through it, but I'm pretty sure he just takes out the bag to show him what a sleeping bag looks
Oh,
like. Because at first I was like, are they gonna
mhm.
rob him? But this is his
Right.
driver. Yeah, it was very weird.
Yeah, I was like, I thought Flynn was, like, nicer than this.
No, apparently they've never seen a sleeping bag. They don't go camping very much.
Squire Will comes into the bar. I don't remember how this starts, but he starts arguing with Sean and he says, "I'm a man from Innisfree and the best man." And, like, this is his whole argument that he's, like, a better person than Sean because he's, like, from town, and
Hmm.
he's also, like, the best man in town. Like, this man is stupid and drunk.
Well, again, he's kind of an ass, and the other bar patrons who just befriended Sean because he bought him around, they kind of take up for him, and they say, "Well, his family's from here. He has every right to buy the land, etc." Somehow Will finds out that Sean has been eyeing his sister, probably because of
Mhm.
the weird holy water incident at the church.
Yeah.
It says, stay away, and so Will says, "Stay away from my sister." And Sean says, "Well, I was just saying hello." And then Will says something about, "Yeah, but you were thinking about good night." And so basically inferring some ungentlemanly like thoughts. And Sean gets like his face drops because he's upset. And he's like, "No, no, I wasn't." And Will's like, "Are you calling me a liar?" And then because he said the lying word, which apparently upsets Sir Squire Will, and they try to get to throw down because he called him a liar.
Everyone has these, like, bizarre feelings about, like, honor and defending their character, but then they're all just, like, drinking during the day, and Will's yelling about being, like, the best man in Innisfree, like, I don't know. Oh, there is a mention too from Sean saying, "Where I come from, we don't talk about our women in saloons." So apparently it was, like, bad form for Will to even be discussing his sister in the bar. Which we already kinda saw with the widow situation. He was talking about the widow at the bar.
Yeah. Yeah, which Sean was in that room when that conversation happened. So I think he's really, whether that's true or not, he's just kind of purposely kind of making fun of
Yeah,
Will
yeah.
because this is the second time in, I don't know, a couple of hours that whether Sean heard it firsthand or secondhand that Will runs his mouth about other people's business in the bar. It
Mhm.
just happens to be two ladies this time.
So basically, Squire Will wants to fight,
Hmm.
Sean does not wanna fight. This is a pretty common theme with Sean. Sean never wants to fight. I feel like this is probably one of those scenes where, like, the person lunges at Sean and Sean just, like, steps away and the person runs into a wall, that kind of thing.
That's exactly
Um
what happened.
Is it?
Yeah, he lunges at him, and Sean's holding something, maybe a jacket or something, and kind of like Spanish bullfights him almost, throws it over his head, and he runs into the wall. And then they go
Mm,
to fight, and Flynn, these two younger guys, and a clergyman
mhm,
walk in and basically stop it. It's the reverend that kind of puts a halt
mm.
to like tells Will to like, hey, chill, man.
Oh, that's right. Because then he has them shake hands and they were, like, squeezing each other's hands to be like, "I'm stronger than you."
Right. Mention Sean is big. They make fun of him. He
Mhm,
eats
he's tall.
steel for breakfast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's John Wayne.
Yeah, yeah.
Will is a big chunk of a man. Like
Yes. John
he
Wayne's
is
tall, but he's not, like,
yeah,
big.
yeah. Will is whoever this actor is, he's about as tall, if not a little taller than John Wayne, and twice as wide.
Mhm.
He's just a big galoot.
Yes.
So when he's shaking his hand, and you can tell he's going to squeeze it, and you think he's going to break Sean's hand,
Mhm.
Sean gives it back to him, and Will is surprised. And I
Yes.
feel like that's a little important for what we get revealed later on.
Yeah, that's true. The Reverend says to someone, "Introduce me to this quiet, peace-loving man," referring to Sean. So apparently, our title, the reference to quiet, is that Sean doesn't like to fight.
After the fight is kind of disbanded, Will and his people leave. The man with the black book is like his only other friend, I guess, and buy some more rounds, try to alleviate the pressure. And Flynn's back into the bar now, and they pour an Irish beer. We're just for movie's sake, we're just gonna call all these beers Guinnesses because it's just
I
that's
mean,
what it
it's
looks
what it
like.
looks like, yeah.
So they pour a Guinness and give it to Sean. Sean passes it around the bar, and he passes one to Flynn, who like gulps it down.
Mhm.
And the beers keep flowing, and every time Sean goes to grab his glass, it is empty because Flynn is just chugging these beers, and it's a
Mhm.
small little thing, and he's not even really in the foreground. Most of it is the bartender pouring beers and everyone just cheering and grabbing beers. It's this little visual joke that could easily go unnoticed,
Yeah.
but I noticed it because John Wayne does a really good job of picking up a glass that's empty, like it's supposed to be really heavy because beer is that heavy, right?
Mhm.
And he's surprised how empty it is, and he stares at it, and he looks over at on his left, and Flynn's just like chugging, guzzling
Yes.
Guinness, and it happens like two or three times. And there's like other people's beers Flynn is also drinking.
Yes.
This man is just, and he's about to drive him home.
Flynn drives Sean to his newly purchased land with his little cottage. Yeah, it does not look great. It's this small stone house, straw roof. Doesn't look like it's probably insulated or anything. Like, he might as well have just bought, like, a cabin. This makes me think of, like, places that I would camp in sometimes with my Girl Scout troop. You would think, like, "Oh, cool, it's an actual building, and we don't have to do tents," but then it was just, like, a stone slab without heat or whatever.
Good thing he brought his sleeper bag.
Yeah, there you go. But the weather also is, like, really gray and blustery and doesn't help the situation. Sean enters his new home to see that there's already a fire going. There's, like, a little pile where you could tell someone had swept up debris that was in the home. We kind of get a quick glance, I think, of Mary Kate, like, hiding behind something, like, so we know she's the one that did all this, and she'd been here, like, cleaning it up, and Sean is
Yeah,
just confused.
I would imagine he thinks something is afoot because Will twice, both at the widow's house business and
Mhm,
then at the bar is claiming this land, and then now there's a fire going. So he's
mhm,
probably thinking his little home has been broken into, and he feigns leaving. He
mhm.
like opens the door and closes it. He picks something up and does this really weird scream and breaks his own window. I think to scare the person in there. I had to watch this scene 3 times. I was like, why? What is this noise? It sounds like he stepped on a fucking cat.
Yeah, it does.
I don't like, and he throws a rock in from inside the house out. So he breaks his only other window he has, and that scares the bejesus out of Mary Kate. She runs out of. She's hiding in the bedroom, by the way, the only other room in the house.
Yeah.
And she runs out, and he just grabs her by the wrist or whatever. He's like, "Where are you going?" And then ends up kissing her.
Yeah, so, like you do in old movies, you're fighting and it turns into kissing. He kisses her, and then she slaps him and
Hmm.
yells at him, but it's so windy that it turns into this shot where they're standing by the open door, and, like, he's holding onto the door with one arm and then holding on to Mary Kate with his other arm, but they're in, like, a line because she's basically blowing away in the wind, and her, like, hair is all over her face, and it's like he passionately kisses her, they slap each other, and then he's, like, holding on to her as she kind of is, like, being blown further into the house, and
Hmm.
all I could think of is this looks like a cheesy romance novel cover.
Oh, I
um,
can totally see that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's somehow revealed that Nicole, I was just here cleaning up. She,
Oh,
I
because
don't
she
know.
says she's a good Christian woman, so she cleaned up the
Yeah,
house for him.
yeah, and then she gives him a kiss and leaves. I mean, it was more of like a. It's definitely not the big John Wayne romantic kiss,
Mhm.
kind of like a peck on the cheek or maybe even the lips. It was just weird that it happened right after she slapped him from him kissing her. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
different connotations there, but still, it happened like one, two, three,
Yeah, so Mary Kate basically, like, runs home in the wind.
dude. This scene, she's running across this field. I hope this was a stunt double. This poor woman, I don't know if they're on a soundstage, if they really are in Ireland on a field somewhere. It is so windy. This woman's hair is all over the place, her dress. She has to run through the lawn, which, as you wrote, is just mud.
Mhm.
There's like little plateaus and valleys. This actress, like, damn near like gets blown away.
Yeah, I
Like,
think she, like,
from
blows over at some point.
legitimately, she looks like a kite in the wind.
We then cut to, like, we assume sometime later, the Reverend and his wife come to visit him. They're riding a tandem bike, and we can see that Sean's really fixed up the house a lot at this point. There are, like, flower boxes and, it's also a nice sunny day. Things look a lot better. I believe they're talking about the gate or a fence that he repainted and he made it green, and the reverend's wife says, "Only an American would have thought of emerald green. You're in
And,
Ireland, you can't think of any other colors." And this
and
is when the reverend kind of has that little thing about Sean's name maybe being something else, and he also keeps repeating the word ring, like trying to remember where he's heard this name and a ring and something. While this is all going on, Sean gets a very large bed delivered, and Mary Kate is, like, spying on him, also seeing the bed get delivered, and everyone is very distressed by how big this bed is. And I think the point is that he must be wanting to get married, or else why would he buy such a big bed? But, like, everyone is talking about it.
I didn't even think it was that big of a bed. It's like a twin bed.
Well, it's hard to tell. It was also being delivered by a horse and buggy, so it's like, I don't know how big could it have really been. So Mary Kate ends up finding Flynn
Hmm.
and is trying to get information out of him about, like, what Sean's intentions are, apparently all spurred by this really big bed delivery.
Yeah, well, he's outside on the road and now he's dressed up. He looks like he's got a little tuxedo on. He's
Mhm.
got tails and a little hat, and he's just drunk in the street.
Yep.
And so Mary Kate sees that and kind of wants to take advantage of maybe loose lips.
Mhm.
And so to bribe him, she brings him into her house. She's like, "Well, the house might be my brother's, but what's in the parlor is mine, and you're welcome to it. I.e., I got some booze for you if you want to tell me some news."
Mhm. Yeah, so Flynn is basically just, like, drunk rambling. And you can pick out a few words. He does say something about Sean and a matchmaker. Basically, it comes out that Sean wanted Flynn to come to Mary Kate to see if she would go for them being together. He says he wants to know if you'd go for it, is how he puts it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the only thing I can understand. Like, I legitimately couldn't understand what this man was saying in this scene.
No.
I was like, "This is." I get they're trying to make him drunk, and his accent is thicker,
Mhm.
but I was lost in the sauce there. I had no idea what was going on. Thank God Mary Kate was there to get me through that scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I figured I had picked out enough to understand what was going on. Mary Kate is very excited to hear that Sean's interested in her and that he also doesn't care about her quote unquote lack of fortune. But then she gets defensive because Flynn says something about, like, she doesn't even have to bring anything with her. And I think he's trying to reiterate the fact that Sean doesn't care that Mary Kate doesn't have much to contribute, whether it be money or, like, stuff. And Mary Kate is suddenly starts talking about how, like, all this stuff is hers, or very, like, specific things in the house are hers. Like you had said, she mentioned, like, everything in the parlor is mine. It's some sort of pride thing.
I think part of it's sentimental too, though, because I
Mhm.
had the feeling that some of it's her mother's, and her mother's not around anymore.
Right. I got the sense that some of this was, like, legitimately supposed to be passed down from her mother to her, like, when she went
Right.
off and got married and started her own household. But, this is not the first time we see Mary Kate bristling about things that are supposed to be hers, and she can actually bring something to this relationship. There is a funny line when, she offers to put some water in Flynn's whiskey.
Yes, she's trying to water down his whiskey because he's had enough.
Yes.
And he says, "When I drink whiskey, I drink whiskey. When I drink water, I drink water."
At the end of this back and forth, Mary Kate basically decides like she would, be interested in a relationship with Sean. She and Flynn spit in their hands and then handshake
Yep,
to
old
seal the
school seal
deal.
a deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's something you don't do after COVID,
Yeah, no. I don't
or probably
why?
that's yeah, yeah.
Yeah, why is that something we ever did? Let's be real. Later, Sean, I guess, formally comes to call at their house. Is he with Flynn?
Yeah, so
Okay.
Flynn is legitimately like some sort of old school matchmaker.
Yeah, or maybe
Like,
they
not,
need like a matchmaker type of like chaperone person.
yeah. So I think the matchmaker term is not like I'm setting you guys up on a date, a blind date
Mhm.
situation. He, as we'll see here, oversees the courting to
Yes.
make sure there's no funny business.
Yeah, exactly.
So he takes Sean to the squire's house to formally come a calling, since there doesn't seem to be any parents to give away Mary Kate.
Exactly. Yeah. So Squire's like the man of the house. They need his permission. This is when Flynn like formally introduces Sean as being from Pittsburgh, Massachusetts.
I'm just going to chalk it up to Flynn being drunk.
That's actually a really good point. It could be. Mary Kate tries to guide this along because Squire hates everyone and everything. He says no and kicks them out. I thought it was so funny. Like, and this is part of the tradition, and I get it, but they're being introduced to each other like they have never met before. Like, here's this
Hmm.
man who would like to marry your sister. Like, you've already met him, tried to fight him. He's bought you a beer. Like, um, they also introduce Mary Kate as a spinster. I don't know if they introduce Sean with, like, a profession or anything. They just say, like, Sean Thornton of Pittsburgh, right?
Yes, because
Okay.
he's keeping all that, in his
Yeah.
pocket. Yeah, no one knows anything about Sean besides that he is a tall American from one of the Pittsburghs.
I do like, after Will gets all mad and was like, "Yeah, this isn't happening." Sean's like, "Okay, so what? Like, we're still gonna, like, be together, right?" And Sean's the only one who doesn't realize that if, like, the man of the house says no, then it's no. Mary Kate and Flynn have to, like, explain to him that this isn't how things work, that they can't just be together, and I think to Sean, he's like, "We're 2 adults, like, what the heck?" And Flynn says something to him like, "This is Ireland, Sean, not America." And it made me think of, "Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown." The man says no, so it's no.
And says no,
Mary
it's no.
Mary Kate's not
And
her own person, that's where we are. Sean, like, dramatically runs out into the rain, and Mary Kate, like, looks out this rain-streaked window at his home.
yeah, keep in mind they are essentially neighbors.
Right, yeah, like, she can see his house from her
She
house,
can
yeah.
see him walking home in the rain, defeated. Now we get emo Sean.
Yeah, there's a narration that says, "Those were the bad days," and it, seems that Sean coped by riding his horse very fast and angrily through town.
Yes, he now has a black horse. He's wearing black pants, black shirt. Like he's definitely emo Sean right now.
He joined My Chemical Romance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see, like, Sean and Mary Kate will, like, awkwardly run into each other on the it's not even a street, like, the lane, and they're, like, incredibly formal with each other. We get to this, like, horse race. There's something about the women putting their bonnets out on posts, and I guess what we see is that when the men cross the finish line where the posts are, they, like, grab someone's bonnet, and it's a big deal that Mary Kate won't put her bonnet out for the men.
Yeah, this was all confusing to me.
Okay.
I mean,
That's
I picked up on it. It's not like I didn't understand what was happening, but what was happening? so, so now Sean's a. We don't know how long between Will saying no, you can't marry my sister to this race, because apparently Sean is now a very avid horse rider.
Sure.
Apparently, unless he did it in America, we don't know. They don't talk about what he did in America.
Right.
So we get the father, the Reverend's wife, and Flynn are
Mhm.
all whispering to each other. And I believe there's a little bit of narration about kind of putting things in motion, about not being so honest to kind of help get Mary Kate and Sean together.
Mhm.
And so those four get this all planned. They do this horse race and they convince Mary Kate to put her bonnet on a post. She doesn't want to because she is not allowed to marry Sean. And that's where I started
Yeah.
getting confused. I was like, does the winner just get
Get
the
married.
woman? Yeah, like, congratulations, you win this bonnet and the person who owns it.
You
Um,
win this woman. You know
yeah.
what? Probably somewhere. I do like, though, that the priest and the reverend are having a really hard time coping with the fact that they're lying. Like,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, we should explain the plan they come up with.
Mm. I
Would you
wasn't at this point. I wasn't fully sure what the plan 100% was. They do the race, and it's I don't know what like how do they know where they're going? There's no lanes, there's no ropes. They're just all on the countryside.
Mhm,
In some racers are like way camera left, way camera right, and it's like four of them in
mhm,
the middle. It's chaos. I don't know. The scenes look great, like a John Ford Western almost,
mhm.
big open field, reflecting water, horses, all the good Westerns, but now it's in Ireland. Well, some of them start cheering for Sean and they go, oh, I mean, Will. They're cheering for Will. So he has a thing for the widow, it seems like,
Mhm,
which probably is why she didn't like him talking about her at the pub or their business.
mhm.
Don't think she likes him back. I don't think a lot of people like Will.
Right. The story that the clergyman and Flynn come up with is that the widow is interested in Squire Will, but
Hmm.
she doesn't want to pursue anything because there's already a woman living in the house, that woman being Mary Kate, implying that if Mary Kate were to be married off, she would be willing to pursue something with Will.
Yeah.
And
This happens right before the race.
mhm.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you. It does not seem that this has any truth to it, except this confused me. While the race is going on, we do see the widow like actually cheering for Will. So then
Hmm.
in that moment I was thinking like, oh, well, maybe she does like him a little bit. We find out later, like, no, she does not.
Yeah, I think so. Besides drinking, the other thing Flynn has is a gambling problem. Well, maybe not so much himself, but he's a bookie. So I
Hmm.
think so. As before the race starts, he goes around and he takes bets, and he's giving Will the odds-on favorite, being the homeboy. I don't want to say hero, but I think unless I missed it, but maybe the widow places the bets on Will because everyone bets, like the whole town, everyone does everything
Oh, right.
together,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
everyone's taking bets. And he says it's like a 5-1 guarantee Will's going to win. So,
Okay, right.
and that could be it, as she does not like Will. Fast forward, Sean wins,
Yes.
and he comes across the finish line and grabs the widow's bonnet.
Hmm.
And Mary Kate, who finally put her bonnet up, she's all mad because he didn't grab
Yes.
her bonnet. I don't know what any of this means. I don't know what the bonnet situation is because they don't get married. He just like stands up there with the widow.
Hmm.
She gives him the cup, like you.
Maybe, yeah, maybe it's whoever presents you with the prize. I don't
I think she like
know.
gives him a
Maybe like
kiss.
I was gonna say maybe like a little kiss on the cheek, but it's still confusing though because everyone who like as they're riding by grabs a bonnet. It's like not just
Yeah,
the winner grabs a
yeah.
bonnet.
Everyone grabs
Um,
a bonnet.
except Mary Kate is very distressed because no one grabbed her bonnet. Hers is the
Yeah,
only bonnet left.
yeah. So were they like a rider short or something? I don't know.
I don't know, man.
Was like the last woman to not have their bonnet taken is like an old maid. Like I don't know this tradition.
Well, right, and that's what I was sort of thinking, like, it seems to mean something to have someone grab your bonnet, but also when you're, like, doing this race, are you supposed to, like, realize whose bonnet you're taking? You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
like, I if you're focused on winning this race, that's just, like, a whole other thing to consider to, like, then be the first across the finish line, but also cross the finish line near the bonnet you want. After all this, Will agrees to let Sean court Mary Kate, thinking that he will then be able to court the widow. Flynn becomes their chaperone like he would have before, I guess, if Will had said yes. They have to do everything in front of him. There's no touching. They can only talk in front of him, except they feel so weird about this that they just don't talk at all because there's like a third person there.
Now he's the real quiet man.
There you go.
Yeah, they're sitting in his carriage back to back, and they're both kind of grumpy looking
Mhm.
because they can't. So then basically they're not talking like you said, and Flynn stops like, all right, get out, walk, but he's like within earshot of them. He's following them in his carriage, and don't no touching, can't hold hands, none of that
Yep.
stuff. And then Sean, to break the ice because they're still awkwardly quiet for whatever reason, and so Sean goes, I like your bonnet. And she's like, excuse me, sir? You didn't like it enough to pick it off the post. And she like pulls back her hand to give him a good old fashioned slap. And Flynn's like, hey, easy now. This is a court, not a Donnybrook. Have the manners until he's your husband, until he can hit you back. All of
Yeah.
that line is crazy.
Yeah, there's so much slapping, like literal slapping and hitting between this couple, and then also like so much implied domestic violence that apparently, like much like alcoholism, is just funny. It's a funny
Mhm.
thing you do sometimes.
At least in this sense, the domestic violence is working both ways. I'm like, yeah, get him.
Yeah.
Slap him back.
I did like the little part where Sean just like isn't understanding the custom, like you said, and he's like, "This is ridiculous. If I was in America, like I'd just pull up outside your house and honk the horn, and you'd get in my car and we go somewhere alone." And she says, "I ain't no woman to be honked at and come a running." So like
Yeah.
these traditions are still like very important to her, even though Sean does not understand this. I do have a note that I do like these shots of them walking. I mean, the scenery is very pretty. They did
Mhm.
actually film this in Ireland. I looked it up.
Nice.
But there's a nice shot of them walking with like flowers in the foreground. I honestly feel like, despite how strange this movie is at times, like it's a nice movie. It is nice to look at. The scenery is nice.
They still feel awkward while they're walking, being under the watchful eye of their designated driver. And they see the bicycle built for two,
Yeah, that the
and they
reverend and his
steal it.
wife ride.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they steal the bike. We're going to say borrow. They probably give it back. They borrow the bike to just get away from the carriage.
Yeah.
They're like, you know what? Let's talk like for real. And they get in the bike. They ride away.
Mhm.
Flynn tries to catch up to them, but he makes a pit stop instead.
Well, the horse stops at the bar
Hmm.
as if he just knows.
Yeah, because this is Flynn say something like, "Oh, come on, we gotta go, we gotta go." Well, while we're here, we can
Yeah.
stop for a moment or something like that.
Yeah, Flynn very much gives up, which is fine. So, yeah, they ride to, like, a cemetery? Or, like, the ruins of a castle?
The Passes Castle earlier, whether it was just Sean or when they were recording just now, but Flynn, I think is when they were recording and they weren't talking, and Flynn's being like a tour guide, like, "Oh, this is a ancient castle from so and so or whatever."
Okay.
And they get to this castle and they're looking around. It looks pretty awesome. I mean, I definitely, if I was a typical American tourist, I'd be taking lots of photos.
Yep.
It looks pretty badass. Then
Yes.
all of a sudden, Mary Kate does what I like to call like a catch me if you can type deal, and she just like looks longingly at Sean and then just runs away.
Yep.
And then he's like, okay, and he runs after her, and they stop. He
Mhm.
doesn't catch her, he gets close, and they both just stop, and then she runs away. And she like takes off her shoes and stockings, and he's like very confused, and she runs through the river,
Oh, no,
and he
I think
follows.
he's looking away because she's taking off her stockings.
Yeah. But then he
It's
turns back, so yeah, he's being polite. But then
okay.
she runs across the river and then waits for him to follow. It's some sort of old school flirting. Then that's when they go to a very stage looking cemetery.
Yes.
So like the one scene that I didn't think looked that good.
Right, yeah.
And Sean is explaining how it's like, I just want to kiss you, and she's like, you can't because of Irish rules. And he tells her, I mean, there's a lot more to it, but that's what it boils down to. I
Yeah.
want to, you cannot because of these reasons. Well, I don't
Right.
care. And he just says no to everything. She's like, this, no. And her look is both distraught at how he's just kind of snubbing his nose to their traditions, but also she's kind of excited about it. Like
Mhm.
her eyes are like kind of flickering, like, ooh, like, I do like this big strong man after all.
This quiet man.
This quiet man who won't shut the fuck up. and tell me how all my traditions are bad.
Ah,
And then the rain comes, as it does in every cemetery scene.
like you do.
Yeah,
They're kissing in the
and
rain.
it's the second time this man's like in the rain. Kind of sounds familiar.
Yeah, all I could think about was our high fidelity discussion about Rob always being in the rain and,
Yeah,
like, Taylor Swift songs about kissing in the rain, like, here we are.
I had thought that it might have reminded me a little bit of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, another
Yeah.
redheaded MK kissing in the rain.
Cheesy romance novel stuff. That's all I could think, especially because, like, every time it thunders, Mary Kate would get really scared as if she had never experienced a thunderstorm before.
Right.
She needed
And can we
John
talk
Wayne to protect her.
yeah, can we talk about Sean's see-through shirt when it like gets
Right.
a drop of water on it?
Yeah, his shirt's entirely see-through now.
Like all that's left is like cuffs and a collar. Like it was made of sugar and just disappeared.
Oh, I thought that was weird too. I'm really glad you did too.
If it had a rating system, it would be PG-13 for John Wayne's nipples.
I think this is the part of the movie, or maybe I was far enough along in that I was like, "Why did I want to rewatch this?" It was the first one that came to mind. Yeah, and so then we like immediately cut to them getting married. They're like sitting for pictures and they look terrified. And I don't know if it's because more so like doing the pictures, everyone's around them. I don't think they're terrified of marrying each other, but they look terrified.
So when Rachel says they just cut to getting married, she's not kidding. They are kissing in the rain and they are cutting to them coming out of the church and the narrator literally just says, and so they got married. That was it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I thought they did look oddly terrified. I think part of it they had to sit still for the photograph because they have the old time
Yeah, and like
what
they were maybe just holding their eyes open wide to like not blink.
yeah, but it
Yeah.
was like the first or maybe second image of them as husband and wife and it looked god awful.
By the way, narration doing so much in this movie. At the reception, which I think is just at like Mary Kate's house or like her brother's house, whatever.
I believe so.
Her dowry is 350 pounds, gold coins. There's a point where someone wants to toast and they say no toasts until we see the bride's fortune.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. Squire Will takes this moment to say that he wants to get engaged to the widow because he was told this was the whole point of getting Mary Kate out of the house, right?
Mhm.
The widow is horrified. Um, so I was at first under the impression that like maybe Will and the widow had actually started dating. No, he apparently had not spoken a word to her, was waiting to get Mary Kate out of the house, and then was like, by the way, I'm marrying the widow. And she was like, hold up, what? So this goes poorly.
Before this happens, though, they are passing on around, looks like glasses, again, for this point of conversation, we're going to call the beer Guinness. This is what it
Yep.
looks like.
Yep.
And there's a little silent toast between our conspirators
Yes.
Flynn, Reverend's wife. I'm
The
sorry, I don't know if
priest.
she has a name, and the priest.
Yeah.
And they all looking around the room to each other, a little wink and a nod. And before they drink, he's like, well, I want to give a toast to myself, is quite literally what he says. I was
Hmm.
like, Jesus. Then he tries to announce his engagement at their wedding reception.
Right.
Listen, let's talk about American traditions. I'd be horrified if this happened at my wedding.
Yeah. Somehow I think this was a little more acceptable back then. I don't know. But yeah, I did like that in Will's kind of like speech about how he has his announcement, leading up to he wants to marry the widow. He says something like, after all, what's a house without a woman in it? Could be anyone. It's just now his sister's married off and he needs a woman in the house.
And when she says no, she's like, are you senseless? And I will give Will credit. He looks like a dullard, but as soon as that happens, he caught on right away. He's like, you guys all tricked me. Damn you all.
Mhm.
And he dumps the money on the floor, says he's not getting the dowry because I've been duped. And Mary Kate's trying to get it off the floor. She's very concerned about all her personal possessions. And Sean's like, we don't need it. I don't care about that. I just care about you. So he's not getting her concern. And as he's on the ground trying to help her up, Will knocks him the fuck out.
Yeah.
Like he does a sucker punch again and just cold cocks him. And while he's unconscious, he's having a flashback of what we find out is a boxing match. She used to be a boxer.
Yes.
And it's a weird cut though, because he's knocked out on the ground and it does like the little wavy dream sequence thing,
Mhm.
but we see from a person's point of view from the ground looking up, we see Sean, shirtless Sean,
Mhm.
with like, I don't know, a drop of blood on his cheek, looking very concerned and distraught. And then it's a wide shot of the boxing match. So I was really confused because Sean gets knocked out at his wedding reception, and
Mhm.
it's an overhead shot of him. Then it cuts to a shot looking up at him.
Yeah, yeah.
It was very weird. But long story short, Sean was a boxer, and he accidentally killed a man in the ring,
Yeah, so that got dark real fast. I forgot
so
that he had actually, like, killed someone,
which is why he doesn't want to fight anybody.
and also why he doesn't want anyone to know what he did in America. So, yeah, this is the big reveal where all these little clues come together. They're back at home. Now, Sean's home that he shares with Mary Kate. Mary Kate's going on about how she always imagined having her own furniture and items around her house, and Sean is not very understanding. I get the impression that, like we had touched on before for Mary Kate, like some of these get sentimental value. Also, I do think there's some pride mixed in there that like she could bring something to the relationship. I feel like Sean is thinking of this just as a matter of money, the way he talks about it. He's not being very understanding. And he keeps saying things like, well, just go get whatever you want, like kind of implying like money is not an issue here. Like, I don't need the dowry, whatever. And I don't think he's realizing that, like, for her, it's the principle of it. And then also some of these things might have value because they were like part of her family. And she does make a point too where she says she basically still just thinks of someone who like cooks and cleans around the house. Like it isn't really her house.
Well, there's that, but she kind of gives him an ultimatum of like, if I don't have my stuff here, we're not going to bed together in a bed that's not mine, and that will not make us officially man and wife. So I'm just a servant here. I'll live here. We'll be married, but I'm just someone who's going to cook and clean for you until you meet me halfway. Like I want my stuff.
Well, she does also say that if they don't have the dowry, they're not really man and wife. I didn't know if that was like her just being attached to these customs, if that is kind of like how things are seen, or if that's her being stubborn. But either way, until she gets her dowry, she does not really consider them truly married. And they don't act like a married couple. He sleeps in a sleeping bag.
Good thing he brought the sleeping bag.
Yeah, good thing he still had that.
But it's funny though, because in the next morning, the party goers from the reception, still questionably drunk maybe from the night before, they come a
Mhm.
call in. Mary Kate hears them and she runs outside to see that Sean slept on the floor in the sleeping bag, and she does look like she feels bad and is concerned about him. But she
Mhm.
says, "Get up and get ready. Don't embarrass me."
Mhm.
Because the idea is like they have supposed to have been spending their first night together, and she wants them to put on that facade for the people showing up, which I think is funny because she just told him we're not man and wife.
Yeah, so the neighbors all showing up or the wedding guests all showing up, they're bringing her stuff, like her furniture, right? And
Yep.
they bring in like a cradle, and then she kind of freaks out and runs outside. But I think it's because she still doesn't have her dowry specifically.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure because she has a quick line here and she looks really sad about the cradle and runs outside and she's yelling at the guys about the rest of her stuff. And
Mhm.
then Sean steps over the cradle when he could have easily walked around it. I feel like there's some sort of reference here to them not being man and wife the night before
They're not
because,
gonna move forward and have kids yet
yeah,
because she still doesn't have her dowry. Yeah.
right. But she's excited to have her stuff. And then
Mhm.
outside, she's still complaining about her actual money, and the younger guys that are bringing all the stuff in said that, well, maybe, or she's complaining that Sean doesn't get it, and I've never met a man like this before, and the
Mhm.
younger guys are like, well, maybe he's a better man than you're used to seeing.
So we cut to like sometime later. We can see that the house is set up. All her furniture is set up. They have like a nice dining area. You could tell like things are decorated, taken care of. Sean's out gardening And is this when he's saying he's gonna plant roses and she wants him to plant something more, like, useful? Yeah.
Yes. Well, he wanted to plant roses earlier when the Reverend and wife stopped by,
Mhm.
and they said, "Well, you got to get a horse, a because you don't have a means of transportation, but also it's good fertilizer."
Okay.
And he just really has it in his head he wants to plant these roses.
Do we ever find out why?
I don't think
Is
so.
this okay. Okay. So it's another thing that never really comes to anything. That's fine. So yeah, we get the impression that they don't have a lot, but he is still trying his best to take care of her. I couldn't help thinking of our discussion from the wedding singer about like security versus wealth. I feel like maybe when we wrap up our season, that's going to be like a recurring theme here in different ways, in different movies.
So I think during this whole movie, while watching it, I thought he has money because he's not worried about it, and he's not worried about it in a way that's romantic. Like, oh, we'll make it. I think he
Mm-hmm.
has
Mm-hmm.
money. I mean, he's buying this property. He left America.
Mm-hmm.
He's very nonchalant about all her possessions and her dowry.
That was my impression too, and that's why I feel like their disagreement over the dowry is him thinking it's just money and he already has it, so, like, it's okay. Like, we don't need
Hmm.
that extra 350. But then again, like I said to her, it's not so much the money itself, it's the principle of it. But yeah, I do agree with you that he must have money because he surprises her with a nice horse-drawn carriage to go into town with. I think she had expected to walk 5 miles into town. She calls it a nice stretch of the legs or something like that.
And somehow, while she's getting ready, he just pulls up and he honks at her, and she does come a running.
Yeah.
So they're all happy now, and he says it's hers. He bought it for her, and he lets her drive.
Mhm.
So that's kind of cool. And they come into town, and there's people celebrating and drinking in the street because Will finally sold, I think, some of the sheep or a property, something. He sold something, and now he has money or more
Sure.
money. And they're all celebrating. Mary Kate says, "Oh, this is perfect timing. He just got more money. He probably has money on him.
Mhm.
Ask him for my money."
Yeah.
And Sean's like, that's kind of tacky. And
Right?
she's like, "No, it's not, you coward." And then she drives off, leaving Sean by himself, like to walk home.
Yeah, he makes a comment saying he doesn't care about the money. He didn't marry her for her money, and it's shameful to ask him for money.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, the dichotomy here. But yeah, she makes Sean walk home.
It's a good stretch of the legs.
Good stretch of the legs.
Somehow she passes this river where she sees the priest fishing, and he's like, "Shush, I'm fishing. Leave me alone." And I guess he said something about like he's been trying to catch this fish for 10 years, or I don't know if I
Yes.
heard that wrong.
Oh,
Okay, so
no,
he
no,
did.
no. That's what he said.
Okay, so some sort of legendary fish in this river. Then she, I guess, pleads her case in Gaelic.
Mhm.
It seems like, and we know what they're talking about. That they're arguing about money, and somehow I understood that she kind of tells him they
They aren't sharing
haven't
a
slept
bed.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't shared a bed. And he says something like he explains to her that married men sleep in the same bed as his wife, and then he gets a bite, he almost catches the fish, and it's like serious conversation turns slapstick comedy, and he like falls repeatedly in this
In the river.
river
Yeah.
while Mary Kate's holding the net and not helping him, and then she just drives away. She's like, "Bye, sorry, sorry, I distracted you. I'm gonna go home now."
But yeah, then we cut to Sean trying to speak to Will about his sister's money at a bar.
The bar, it's
The
like the
bar,
town bar.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the
sorry.
same bar. Yeah.
Will knows what Sean's getting at. He wants to make Sean ask in front of everyone, ask for the money in front of everyone. Again, Will tries to fight him and Sean walks away because
Hmm.
he's a quiet man.
Sure.
So Sean ends up at the Reverend's house. We learn that the Reverend is very into sports, like, randomly, and that's how he realized who Sean was because
Hmm.
he follows boxing. Sean comes out with the whole story. He accidentally killed a man in the boxing match. He feels guilty about it, obviously, but also because he says the other guy was a good person and he just did this for money, basically. And Sean is, like, traumatized, thinking that now he's gonna have to fight Will in order to get Mary Kate's dowry, but then also feels like he's going to lose Mary Kate if he doesn't fight Will for the dowry. I do think it's a little funny that Sean's having this inner turmoil of like, "Oh, I will kill another man with my punches." Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, the Reverend says sometimes you have to fight for basically you have to fight for love, not money.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
he's like, I don't want to fight. I don't care about the money. He's like, yeah, but your wife does. If you love your wife, you'll do it.
I love that this is such, like, an old movie problem, like, I love my wife and have to fight for her honor, but I've killed a man, so I can never fight again. I do think it's funny, though, that one of them went to a Catholic priest, one of them went to a Protestant reverend, and, this being Ireland. But back at the house, they kinda make up and they admit to each other that they both went, like, seeking advice.
And yeah, he comes home from his stretch of a leg and she's got dinner ready and she's feeding him. And he says he's not hungry. He's like, oh, the drink will do that to a man. He's like, I didn't drink. Because she thinks he went out and got drunk like everyone else does. And he's just
Yeah.
having this inner turmoil. And they
Mhm.
seem to have made up. And the next morning, she's gone. And she's like, oh,
Right.
yeah, I had to leave because I'm ashamed of you.
Yeah, well,
Christ.
this is what's also so bizarre is not only does she, like, ditch him the next morning, he finds out because he opens the door while he's, like, looking for her and sees Flynn just sitting outside his house being like, "Oh, yeah, your wife left you."
Right.
So I don't know where he came from exactly, how he knows, whatever. But yeah, he does say that she loved him too much to be with him because she's also ashamed of him because he won't fight
And
for the dowry.
yeah, and all this in hindsight, I feel like was another setup. Because why is Flynn there? She goes to the train that
Mm,
we find out is notoriously never on schedule. They say that at the beginning, and they say
yeah,
it in this scene where they're like yelling. He's like, "Oh, it's 4 hours late."
yeah, yeah.
So Sean gets on his emo horse and rides into town, and it's like finds her on the train and just starts. Oh God, he starts aggressively dragging her the five. So he came on a horse and he drags her the 5 miles home. Just get back on the horse.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, if you haven't seen this movie, he's literally dragging Mary Kate by the wrist through town, starting from the second that he gets her out of that train car. And first of all, he shows up at the train station, like, opening and slamming each car door of this train until he gets to the end and finds her, and she's, like, shrinking down in her seat, which is the only reason why I don't know if I agree that this is a setup, but she looks
Mhm.
scared. He finds her, drags her out by the wrist, and continues dragging her all the way back to her brother's house. But while this is happening, the whole town is following them and, like,
Which is
cheering.
this is another reason why I think it's a setup.
Okay.
That because it's so weird that the town, every cut we have of Sean dragging Mary Kate, the crowd behind him gets bigger and bigger, and they're
Mhm.
cheering. At one point, she loses a shoe, and God, this poor actress, falls, and John Wayne just keeps like pulling her like a child.
Mhm.
Another point, someone finds it and gives it back to her. She's trying to put it on, and in doing so, falls again and is dragged like a child. At
Mhm.
another point on the dirt lane, as they get closer to the house, and the crowd is huge, an old woman comes up and just gives Sean a stick and says, "This is to beat the woman with." Like, what the?
It's just like, "This is a good stick. Use
Yeah.
it to beat your wife with."
So he drags her all the way to the squire's house. So past their place, that's in the background, and there's some sort of machinery in the yard, and he's like burning things.
Mhm.
I don't know, but he essentially drags her all the way to her brother and essentially throws her at him, saying, "Well, I don't got a dowry, I don't got a wife." Just
Mhm. In a very
and
John Wayne way, yeah. Let me back you up for 1 second.
sure.
I wanted to point out, I think he, like, throws her down a hill at one point.
Oh yeah, I'm
Like, it's
sure.
just horrible. Yeah, like you said, she's tripping and falling everywhere, but the townspeople all following them and the crowd growing, it makes me think of Love Actually. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but, like, there's a scene
Mhm.
in the end where Colin Farrell's character is going to propose to someone, and he goes to her house, she's not there. They're like, "She's at work, we'll show you where it is," and, like, they attract this huge crowd to him, like, going to find her at work. So I couldn't help thinking of that, but obviously, in Love Actually, no one's, like, dragging their partner by the wrist.
Mm-mm.
Also, they pass the Reverend at one point while all this is going on, and he is delighted to see Sean dragging Mary Kate
Yeah.
through town.
Again, I think it's a setup. I think they somehow all talked behind Sean's back
Maybe. But
because he seems okay with this. The father seems okay with this. Flynn seems okay with this. The workers in the field are like, "Hey, your in-laws are coming to visit you,"
yeah,
while he's like dragging her through the mud.
I really like that line when they are approaching Will's house and someone's like, "I think your in-laws are coming to visit you."
So, like I said, he throws Mary Kate at Will and says, "If we don't have the dowry, we're not married." So she's your problem, essentially.
Yeah, and
And
he even says, like, "That's your custom, not mine."
mhm,
So here we are, like
now it's throwing it back in their face.
mhm.
And then it just seems so easy that he gives him the money. He just throws it at him. Like, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
it's like Will just finally gives up, or
right.
maybe because he doesn't want his sister to be, like, shamed like this, that
Could be. Yeah.
because like, him saying, like, "Okay, it's not a real marriage because there's no dowry," like, that's a pretty big deal.
And then they just throw it in the fire.
Yeah, so Will throws the money at Sean, Mary Kate holds the door to, like, a what do you call it?
Like a kiln or
Like a
something.
kiln, yeah, and he throws it in to be like, "See it, we really don't need this money, it's not about the money, it was just about the principle," like, really hammer that point home.
Another reason why I think it's a setup is the second that happens, she gets this big old smirk on her face, chin
Mhm.
up, and proudly walks home.
But also, even if it wasn't about the money, like, you could still use that money, you know?
Right.
Are we that rich? Are we, like, widow rich?
The movie's not done yet.
Oh my god.
I thought this was the end of the movie. I'm like, okay, happily ever after. And Grumpy Will takes a swing at Sean for whatever reason. I think he is still insulted by all of this.
Well, I mean, Sean did just, like, drag his sister through the fields.
Yeah, I don't think that's why he threw a punch at Sean. He probably
I would like to think it
no.
is.
I think it's because he got the money out of him. I think it's a selfish
Mm,
reason. Swings, misses, gets a little gut punch. Sean was gonna leave it at that,
yep.
and then another sucker punch happens. And honestly, we could either talk about this for 20 minutes or it could be 2 seconds long, but essentially, it is a brawl that involves the whole town
Yep.
from the squire's property through town,
Mhm.
crowd getting even bigger. This is like a five house town. Why is there 5,000
So
people all
many
of a sudden?
people, yeah.
Like, did they ship people from Dublin to see this fight? Flynn is taking bets again, as one does.
Yeah, while this is all going on, like, everyone starts placing bets,
And then
and
other people start fighting each other.
it turns into a brawl, but then at some point, Flynn kinda stops it and reminds everyone it's just between Sean and Will, so then everyone just crowds around them while they go after each other, and Sean eventually, like, punches Will into the river, and
Yeah.
everything kinda stops. Will's like, "Okay, well, like, help me out," and you think that that's the end, and then as soon as Will gets out of the river, he just starts punching Sean again, so, like, we keep going,
Hmm.
we fight all the way like, 'cause they're traveling from, like, Will's house into town.
Yeah, they're going opposite way that he was just dragging his sister.
I think so, yeah.
They fall in some hay. There's a bishop that was mentioned briefly visiting, and him and the reverend are like looking through binoculars and excited that there's a fight going on. I don't know. That was weird. Like, why do we have this bishop in town?
Well, so the Reverend had mentioned earlier when Sean went to visit him that the bishop was coming to, like, check out the church, like, how things are going, but he might end up moving the Reverend elsewhere, I think due to, like, population
Mm,
or however many people are attending his church. And so, of course, when the bishop is visiting, this fight breaks out. There are two like clergy members who find the priest in the river again trying to catch the fish, and they're like, "You should go stop this fight." And then I think it's maybe he and the reverend, or it's the reverend and the bishop are like, "Yes, we should. It's our duty. We should stop the fight." But they're like enjoying it too much to go stop it.
Mhm.
And like
Yeah,
this
I don't
poor
know.
priest who's never going to catch this fish.
Well, he doesn't care about the fish anymore when he finds out it's Will and Sean fighting.
Yes, that's
So
right.
he's entangled in all this. They make their way, we'll call it the halfway point between their land and town, and they take a breather at the bar, as one does.
Hmm.
And just the two of them go in, which is kind of cool. And the barkeep says, drinks around the house because of the fight. And Will's like, no, I'm paying for it. And John Wayne says, no, I'm paying for it. And then they fight about who's paying for the beer. And meanwhile, like they're each putting coins on the bar, slapping it away. So they probably paid for like 10 beers in total.
Right.
And then they fight some more.
Right. They fight some more. Sean literally punches Will out the door of the bar, like
Yes.
breaks the door. I don't really know how it ends because I my next note is that I liked the reverend's wife apologizing to him later because she made a bet on the fight and lost a few pounds or something. And then you see the bishop coming out to pay the reverend for their bet, and he had bet
Hmm.
even more than she did.
We don't see the end of the fight. What we do see is another big wide shot of their land with the cottage far away,
Mhm.
Sean's little cottage. And Will and Sean are arms around each other,
Mhm.
clearly drunk, singing Irish tunes of some sort. And it cuts to Mary Kate in the house, like looking out the window, all excited. And then she sets the place for them. And they are eating whatever meal she prepared for them. And there's a pitcher of Guinness. John Wayne like overplays his hand about acting drunk because he like
Yeah.
goes to pour the beer in a glass and just like aggressively sloshes it and gets all over the place for Will and his own beer.
Mhm.
So now they're friends. Everyone's happy. They fought for an entire day across the town and back.
I did really like that when Mary Kate sees them coming home, like, they're clearly, like, drunk and stumbling already, and she's trying to, like, get the tablecloth perfect and make sure, like, everything's so presentable because, like, her husband's coming home and now they're having a guest over, and it's, like, supposed to be very formal. No one's gonna
Yeah.
notice her tablecloth, poor Mary Kate. We cut to, like, the crowd kind of gathering on a street, and the priest is there telling everyone, "When the reverend comes by, I want you all to cheer like Protestants." This is where I think the reverend was maybe leaving town because he had mentioned the bishop might move him, but I also wasn't sure because, like, his wife is the one that gave him the heads up that he's coming through.
You see the Reverend's wife riding a bike
Mhm.
across the street on the bridge, and the narrator goes, "What is that crazy woman up to now?" I was like, "What? What?" Like it
Yeah.
just seemed like he was narrating something that had happened, and now it's happening right now as he's narrating
And
it
the
to
priest
us.
is the narrator, yeah. I
That's very confused.
agreed. But basically, the reverend drives through the crowd of people, they all cheer for him, like, he's a jolly good fellow kind of a thing, and, this is why I assumed they were, like, seeing him out, like, he's being moved, but his wife is on the bike and also seeing him off, so, like, I don't know. We see that Will and the widow are courting now. I think we cut back to Sean and Mary Kate outside their house, and they seem happy, and we see them, like, they're doing something outside, we see them, like, running back into the house. I did like this one little detail that, there had been there's this, like, very large puddle constantly between the lane, the main road or whatever, the lane in their house, and you can see that they put, like, a stone path over that puddle. It's a big enough puddle that it's never gonna evaporate and leave, but I wouldn't exactly call it a pond. That's it, the end.
What a ridiculous movie.
God. Yeah, it's so funny because I mentioned this in the beginning that I always saw commercials for it on Turner Classic Movies, like it was this great sweeping romance. And then, I watched it again all the way through and I was like, man, like, I think they were playing up all this, like, hitting and dragging as, like, passion and, like, this great romance, but watching it back was just kinda jarring.
I get it, but at the same time, when you watch an old movie and you know things are just kind of different, and sometimes it felt more purposefully slapstick and
Yeah.
funny than than maybe we're thinking about it.
I don't know if this held up for me, like, I still enjoyed it. I like John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara as, like, a screen duo. I think they played off of each other really well. I remembered her, like, slapping him after he kisses her.
Hmm.
I did not remember all the other, like, dragging and fighting. So yeah, I don't know. I would still watch this again, but yeah, what a strange movie.
I don't have any other thoughts.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna take a break and we'll come back with Joe's pick. All right, welcome back. And now we're gonna talk about Joe's pick.
So for my St. Patrick's Day pick, I picked Kill the Irishman, directed by Jonathan Hensley. The release date was March 11th, 2011, rated R, and this is based on To Kill the Irishman, The War That Crippled the Mafia by Rick Porrello. If you've not seen this flick, it is about Cleveland, Ohio. In 1970s Cleveland, Ohio, organized crime was at its peak. Through unions and labor workers, they had a lot of the city under their thumb. Danny Green rises to power through the dock union workers, stands up for himself and his crew against the mafia, whom he also works for, yet doesn't like getting taken advantage of and pushed around very lightly. Danny ends up ruffling the wrong feathers and creates a war that eventually leads to his demise and the end of the Cleveland Mafia. I believe the first time I saw this was when it came out in DVD. I think it had a short stint in theaters. I don't know if it had a big release. I think it was at the Cedar Lee, but I didn't get a chance to go see it. So I had bought it about right when it was released, probably most likely just because it is a Cleveland based film. And why not?
Yeah, we tend to do that around here. We really like movies about Cleveland.
About Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get into that. Did you know this movie is set in Cleveland, Ohio, on the shores of Lake Erie? This is my first time seeing it. I mean, I've heard about it. It's been on my radar for ages. I just never got around to seeing it until now.
All right, so we open with the font based on a true story, and we see right away Danny, which is played by the late Ray Stevenson, and we open on Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, nice Cleveland skyline.
Hmm. So
Mhm.
this is 1975,
Mhm.
and as Danny is driving his infamous green Cadillac, he's playing some music, and his tape deck in his car starts sparking, and the music starts skipping a little bit, and he obviously realizes something is afoot and jumps out of his car right when the car explodes. He gets up and shouts something like, it's not that easy to kill me, or
Yeah,
some
like
sort of,
you're gonna have to do better if you want to kill Danny Green or something like that.
yeah. Danny Green was kind of known as the unkillable,
Hmm.
so we'll see many attempts on his life. And then we cut straight to Val Kilmer, who's
Val Kilmer gives us a little bit of his life story growing up with Danny in Collinwood. But at the end of it, he says that, he ended up being a cop investigating organized crime on the Lake Erie shore. And I wrote, who wrote this? No one here talks that way.
no, they
Uh,
are going to be pounding into our head that we are in Cleveland, Ohio,
on the
by
shores of Lake Erie.
telling us this.
Hmm. I did want to say this voiceover we have with Val Kilmer immediately after our introduction to Danny. It made me think of Goodfellas, except I guess he's talking about for as long as he can remember he wanted to be an FBI agent. I don't know. But it just the mafia setting, the immediate voiceover, and it sounded a little lighthearted, kind of like the beginning of Goodfellas. These are the vibes I got. I don't know about you.
No, definitely for sure. Even like the tone of his voice does kind of mimic Ray Liotta at the beginning of Goodfellas in
Yeah.
the opening scene, like you're talking about, which might be a reason, or one of the many reasons this is kind of compared to Goodfellas, or often called the Irish Goodfellas.
One of them is Irish.
Yeah, very clearly Irish.
Yeah, much like The Quiet Man, you know he's Irish because he has red hair.
And likes to paint things green. From there, we cut to a shipyard on the Cuyahoga River. We see Danny and a small crew in this like metal container wearing bandanas around their faces, barely clothed. I think they're shoveling grain or salt or something.
I couldn't quite understand what they were doing, and I feel bad because I just thought of this as like an old-timey kind of job you did on the shipyard.
Yeah, it's definitely that. And it just kind of makes me think of that time period where immigrants kind of came over in different waves. And the newest one was always kind of working, obviously, from the bottom up and doing what others wouldn't do.
Hmm.
And these guys are clearly working in not safe environments.
Yeah, like extreme heat.
So much so that one of his coworkers like passes out and they have to drag him out and throw him into an already waiting ice bath just in case this happens, because apparently it happens enough that they have to have a cold plunge on hand.
Yeah, I was shocked by this. Like, I don't know what you call it. Whoever's in charge of the yard, he's being very blasé about it. He's like, "What? This happens. Don't act like you've never seen this before." So obviously that was shocking.
Well, we'll see later. He's the union president, but yeah, he's like, "Oh, get back to work. This happens all the time. See,
Oh,
look,
that's true.
we have things safely put in place for when you get too hot."
Maybe this isn't really important to the movie, but I guess my understanding of unions is they made things safer, and this guy
Yes,
really is not. I read The Jungle. I know what's up.
yeah, yes. Well, the stock worker union president guy, I want to point out that he's the same actor that was the warden in Shawshank Redemption, and it very much is like the same character, or like it seems the same to me.
Yeah, definitely. Now that you've mentioned this, yes. So I did want to point out that when the guys all take their lunch break, they're all hanging out except Danny is sitting off to the side reading a newspaper, and this is supposed to give us an idea of his character. They talk a lot about him being really smart and really knowledgeable, and it seems like he just reads a lot. But my notes have Danny reads an intellectual.
It does come up a little bit later in the movie, here and there. After their shift, we cut to a bar, and we're introduced to Joan, played by Linda Cardellini. You might recognize her from like Hawkeye's wife in the Avenger movies or Freaks and Geeks. She's been in a handful of other things. Yeah, if that's why she looks familiar to you. Um, she asks his buddies if he's taken or single or something like that, and he's reading a book at the bar. She hits on him by being playful and calling him the ugliest guy on Lake Erie.
Yeah. Again, no one talks like this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think anyone here talks about Lake Erie, like, specifically. People will say something about the lake. We've had 2 references now to Lake Erie.
So that Cleveland charm works on Danny, and him and Joan go hook up in his car,
Mhm,
but they are interrupted by Danny's friend Art, who is knocking on the window saying that he's in trouble.
mhm, and I my thought was he must really be in trouble because, like, Danny is not dressed and, like, obviously in the middle of something, and he's like, "Danny, I'm in really big trouble."
Well, he takes him to an underground casino type thing. They're in like a
Mhm,
hall under a
mhm,
church or something like that.
mhm.
And this was not uncommon in Cleveland at the time as part of the one of the many arms of the mafia.
So all we know right now is that Art is in trouble with someone named John Nardi, and this is a Italian bigwig in the mafia. But there's a line that says, "Everyone in Cleveland knows who John Nardi is." Watching this movie, I kept laughing to myself about like, gotta make sure everyone knows you're still in Cleveland. I did look up the filming locations and they apparently filmed in Detroit, which boo. But I appreciate, like, here's the thing. If you're gonna be set in Cleveland, please film in Cleveland, and if you're gonna film in Cleveland, we don't always have to be New York or LA. This is my personal pet peeve.
Hmm.
Everyone who films here, I feel like, are just trying to make Cleveland look like something else.
Well, funny you say that because they tried to film in Cleveland and it didn't go through, and that's why they
Mhm.
went to Detroit. They offered him a better deal or tax break or something like that.
Yeah, I understand there's sometimes underlying issues, but there was also a quote from the director saying that, like, Cleveland looked a little too pretty, like, it wasn't believable as 1970s Cleveland anymore or something.
Yeah, I remember when this came out, I had made a joke with one of my friends saying, "Oh, they shot in Detroit because if you want 1970s Cleveland, you go to Detroit."
But that all being said, it's not like you watch this movie and you think it doesn't look like Cleveland.
Hmm.
They don't need all these constant references.
Yeah, they did a good job with the scenery. I thought there are
Good.
places that I'm like convinced they shot in Collinwood on Waterloo, and I know they didn't, but it looks. Well, also they would have to go back in time, which obviously they did not. But
Right,
it
right.
looks like I can see it in my head. Like, yeah, that's definitely Waterloo. Somehow they dressed it up for the '70s, and they're in Detroit.
Well, anyway, back to Cleveland on the shores of Lake Erie, John Nardi.
John Nardi. This is Vincent D'Onofrio. They kind of shoo Art out of the conversation, but we, the audience, follow him outside. Danny shows up and says the books are basically balanced. And Art's like, "What did you do?" And we never know exactly what happens. We kind of make some inferences as the movie goes on, but he makes Art promise several times, promise him that he's never going to gamble again. So
Yes.
basically, Danny's putting his neck on the line for Art.
And we do see that whatever deal he made involves letting the mafia come in and, like, help themselves to the containers at the shipyard. Like,
Hmm.
Danny has that in working at the shipyard
And so that's happening. And there's a conversation with Danny, and I think his one friend is named Billy. Big
with
Sideburns
the
is Billy.
sideburns, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm,
Billy, the Sideburns. They start talking about him becoming the union president. And he's like, "Oh, I never do that." It's like, "You got the people behind you. Everyone loves you." So
mhm.
he goes to tell the current boss that he's going to do it.
He's gonna run against him.
Went against him, yeah. And he laughs at him. He threatens to go in his house and drink his beer and take advantage of his girlfriend. He also uses the fact that he knows what's going on late at night on the docks, that he is basically letting these guys come in and rob whatever they want.
Mhm.
And
The Cleveland PD will be paying you a visit.
yes,
Not the police, not the cops, unless he cuts the current union boss in on the deal with the mafia.
yeah, some sort of percent.
Mhm,
So they agree that Danny and Phil, this big Polak guy, his words, not mine, that they're going to meet at the machine shop at midnight and he's going to pay him off because he can't
mhm.
pay him at any other time during the day.
No, you
And
gotta it's gotta be extra shady,
yeah, well,
so
we see why too, because then
that's
his
true, yes.
muscle pulls a gun
Mhm.
and Danny laughs it off and says only a Polak would bring a gun to a fist fight or something to that effect, and starts taking off his jacket while throwing insults at this
Mhm,
guy.
mhm.
And those insults convince him to fist fight Danny instead of just getting the job done and ending Danny Green, which would, roll credits and no movie.
Well, right, yeah, this guy obviously had the upper hand, he had a gun,
Hmm.
and he coulda just shot Danny and left, but he's like, "No, you're right, let's fist fight."
Yeah. I think he's a big dude, so he probably thinks he's going to win, but that's
Mhm,
not the point, I suppose. He does not win. Danny wins. And we see him back in the president's office.
like, the next day.
Yeah. And the guy comes in, like, "What are you doing in here?" Yada, yada, yada. And he's calling for, I think his name is Bill. And Bill does not show up. I don't even know. They don't see if he kills him or not, but he might have. But either way, he throws the Buddy Holly looking glasses at the union president. And they're like covered in blood.
Yeah, that the bodyguard Bill had been wearing,
Hmm.
and he says something like, "He's not coming."
Yeah.
Um, I guess my impression was that he had killed him because he had the glasses, but, like, you don't see it.
So Danny gets up from behind the desk, and the current union president tells him he's basically going to threaten him to get out. And he says, "You have 3 seconds." And Danny interrupts him and says, "To do what?"
Mhm.
And that keeps happening. He's like, "To do what? To do what?" And it's emphasized with a slap Like almost
Yes.
every time, he just slaps him over and over again.
Yeah, I keep saying, "I'll give you 3 seconds." Get slapped. Very satisfying
Yeah,
to
that was fun.
see obnoxious characters get hit.
Hmm.
Unlike in The Quiet Man, the slapping here is fine with me.
Yeah, got it. Yes. And so this union president's not only just taken aback because he's getting slapped around, but I feel like up until this time, no one really stood up to him or whatever union because they didn't have any legs underneath them.
Right.
And if Danny's letting the mafia in and taking whatever they want, they kind of have his back and probably his blessing to run the dock because it benefits them. You get a little montage. He's the new union president. Him and
Mhm.
Joan get married. That was
Mhm.
quick. I feel like the scene that they're celebrating their engagement before like they show him coming out of the church. That very much looks like the inside of the Flatiron to me, downtown in the flats.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
They start fixing up the facilities. He tells everybody to paint this green. The carpet's green. His car is green.
Did
His
you
name is
guys
green.
did you guys know he's Irish?
Right. It's
Did
very
you know
set.
we're in Cleveland?
It's funny though because he paints everything green like Sean paints his house or his door green
Yep.
in your movie. So,
Yep. I did think about that,
yeah.
especially because in The Quiet Man, like I said, I think that woman was sort of giving him crap about it, like, "Oh, no one would think of emerald green."
So back in the office, they're trying to renegotiate something. I think I don't know, ships coming in and out, or
Mhm. I wasn't quite following this, but yes, some sort of negotiation on cost or payment.
mhm. And this guy calls Danny a potato eater, which Danny does not like. He goes on the spiel about his ancestors dying from potato famine.
He's like,
Uh,
"By the way, that's very offensive because my family died in the potato famine."
and this
Oh.
guy is not phased. He doesn't care. He insulted Danny. So Danny brings more culinary stereotypes into the mix and asks him if he's Scottish. And he's insulting hags because it's fat that they eat out of a sheep's asshole, is what he says. And I guess that's the end of that. There's the negotiation.
Yeah, for some reason this works.
Yeah. He was like, you're right. We eat the worst food, I guess. The money's
Yeah,
yours, Danny.
that's basically how it is.
I've had haggis in Ireland and it wasn't bad. Very rich,
I
as you
have
would imagine.
never had haggis. Part of my family is Scottish. The Campbells are in Braveheart. They're a family in Braveheart.
Nice.
We have a crest and the whole deal, but I've never had haggis, so
Hmm.
I don't really think it was something my family did.
But we get to see Val Kilmer again, and they're in a bar, right? The Theatrical Grill, I think is what it's called.
Yep.
But he's at this bar, cop and con bar, basically is what he says, where they
Yep.
rub elbows with each other. And Danny tries to buy him a drink. I like to buy a Cleveland's finest a beer, and
Yep.
he's like, no, you can't. It doesn't look good. Don't buy me a beer.
Yeah. Yep.
Cleveland.
Cleveland's finest.
Danny he's successful.
Mhm.
He's married. They buy a house. They have a baby. I think they have three altogether. Eventually, we'll see three little
Mhm.
kids running around at some point.
Yep.
We get more montages of like Danny's family life. We get him as the union president. Let the mafia do what it's doing. Business looks good.
I did like this little scene when you're talking about the montage of family life. You see the mafia, like, taking specific items out of shipping containers, like, that they're just helping themselves to, and then later they're bringing those items as, like, baby gifts when his wife is pregnant again, and she's
Yeah,
just like, "Oh, wow, what's all this?" And all the guys are, like, laughing, like, because they
yeah,
just stole all this stuff for her. They, like, bring her a bunch of lamps.
yeah. It's a bunch of
Like,
weird
it's
stuff.
yeah, it's nonsensical, especially for, like, a baby shower.
I feel like there was like a rocking horse. There's like one thing that kind of fit a baby shower, but everything else is just like random furniture.
Right, yes,
Sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
But they definitely look like they're doing well.
And while this is happening too, we get a guy with a little film camera following them in this car, and we see Val Kilmer again. I
Mhm.
think they're at a park or beach or something, and the reporter comes up to Val Kilmer and asks if he knows Danny Green, He's like, "Oh, you're doing a piece on him?" And he's like, "Something like that. I just wanted to give you a
Mhm.
heads up. It's called Corruption on Cleveland Waterfront."
Yes.
And Val's like, "Oh no."
Yeah, we see when the paper comes out that it's
Hmm.
about corruption. Yeah, they got the plane dealer right, so that was nice. Good for them.
The rest of his crew, once that comes out, are cleaning out the offices, trying to scramble to take all their belongings or any evidence. And his friend Billy's like, "Come on, man, let's go." And respectfully, Danny is going down with his ship,
Mhm.
and I feel like that's kind of cool. He knows what he did, and he's
Mhm.
they're gonna have to pin it on somebody, and I feel like he is being responsible and taking it so his friends and etc. won't have
Mhm.
to take the fall.
Right. Yeah, he definitely is just sitting there waiting for them to come arrest him. So he ends up being charged with grand larceny, extortion, and labor racketeering. They do use real news clips from the time to explain all this to you, which they do a few times during the movie, which that was a touch that I really like. Also, kind of strange though that, we're not cutting back to like the Val Kilmer narration from the beginning. It's just, I guess my thing is when you have that opening narration, you think that's going to carry you through the entire movie.
Yeah, they sometimes replace his narration with these real clips.
We do have more Val Kilmer narration, it's not totally gone. I did really like seeing the actual news footage.
Well, I think when Val Kilmer is narrating,
Mhm,
it's clearly from his point of view,
mhm,
which could be leaned a certain way as a screenwriter,
mhm,
coming from a book. We don't know if he's telling real facts, real tales. It's just kind of his opinion
mhm.
from his point of view. The news footage kind of makes the audience like solidify that at least these things actually happened. Like it's not
Gotcha.
artistic license. But yeah, he's facing a lifetime ban from the union, 10 years
Mhm,
in prison,
mhm,
or you can be an informant, still do what you're doing, let us know what the mob's doing, and you can walk free. And he chooses that because, he's got a family to think about. And it's kind of funny because this has all been landslided since he decided to help his buddy Art.
yeah, literally all of this has come about because of Art getting in trouble and Danny, like, taking up for him,
Hmm.
and I thought that multiple times through this movie that he kind of accidentally slid into being a gangster or, being part of the mob because, as we will see now, because he's been banned from the union and he can't do the work he's used to doing, he gets in deeper with the mob in order to just survive, like, in order to have any income.
Yeah, they lose their nice big house. They live in a smaller house in a lesser favorable neighborhood, I guess. There's a bunch of guys running around with motorcycles causing disturbances.
Mhm. And,
Houses and yards look not
like,
kept well.
abandoned. Mhm.
Some look abandoned. He's got a few older Irish neighbors, so I'm kind of thinking maybe this is like their Irish ghetto where they kind of band together. Now, this might be Collinwood now. I think maybe the bigger house they showed earlier was some other suburb, but I think he might be in Collinwood now,
I
where.
think you're correct based on, like, the news footage we see later.
Mhm. But yeah, like you said, he can no longer do the work he used to do. He can't be in the union, so he can't work on the dock. So, to your point, he needs to get deeper in the mob because he needs to make money. And he
Mhm,
goes to John Nardi to look for a
mhm,
job. He goes to the restaurant where Christopher Walken's character runs
mhm,
as his legitimate business,
mhm,
but he's also a loan shark. Although
mhm.
he doesn't like the term loan shark, he says.
Yeah, we learned this.
Um,
2 things about this scene. I like that when Christopher Walken's character is walking out into the dining room of the restaurant, he's saying hi to people. He obviously knows a lot of movers and shakers because he says hi to the DA,
yeah.
of Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, Ohio, shores of Lake Erie. I guess, like, at the end of the scene, I don't remember how it comes about, but Christopher Walken tells Danny, "Young people don't wanna work these days."
So, what do you do when you have no restaurant skills, but your boss also is a loan shark?
Mhm,
Yeah, beat up people for gambling debts. So he's like working both sides here, but not really. He's just basically just lying to the FBI because he keeps going to like a payphone and like, oh, what's going on? He goes, nothing of interest, anything interesting, nothing of interest, nothing's going on here, nothing to see. And
Mhm.
then they cut to him beating some schmuck up for like owing Christopher Walken money.
I realized that nothing really ever comes of him being an FBI informant.
No, because he lies. There's nothing. He has to make his money with the mob, so he can't
Right.
tell the mob and get them in trouble because then he's making no money. And he also, in a weird way, he's an honorable man, and he doesn't want to betray these people that are helping him. And he's
Right.
doing things that are not exactly legal, but
Right.
how he's currently making a living.
Mhm.
And when you're in a situation where you can't trust the cops, why give them information anyway?
Mhm.
Like he's just using that to get out of jail and just feeding them lies so he can stay out of jail.
Right. Yeah. My impression at first was that, because in the beginning we see that someone is trying to kill him because this car blew up. My impression was that people turn on him or come after him because he is found out to be an FBI informant.
Mm.
And that really ends up being nothing to the greater story except to explain how he got out of doing jail time.
He's out in his front lawn and he's talking to his garbage collector, and the guy
Mhm.
tells him how it's a good gig. He's his business. No one wants to do it. Kind of like I said earlier, different ethnic groups coming into the country and doing the dirty work, making a name for themselves.
Mhm.
And asks Danny Green what he does for a living. So kind of a little foreshadowing. He sees this guy. He's got his own business, and he's over here beating up guys for somebody else just to stay out of jail.
Yeah. And I don't know if you touched on this. The garbage collector says specifically like it's actually really good money.
Val Kilmer comes back.
Val Kilmer's narration comes back and explains that his wife has become friends with Joan because they met at church and hit it off. And I thought that was very funny. We should also note, I don't know if we noted already, that Val Kilmer grew up in the same neighborhood as Danny,
Yeah,
right?
he mentions that he recognizes him from
Mhm.
the neighborhood back when.
So they know each other a little, but they also recognize now that they're kind of on either sides of things. Like, obviously, Danny knows that Val Kilmer's character is a cop. I think, well, at this point, I guess that's fair to say Val Kilmer's character knows that Danny's up to illegal stuff at this point because he's already been arrested once.
There's a cookout scene, and they're
Mhm.
talking about Vietnam,
Mhm.
and Danny is against it. He kind of makes a parallel to how the British have been kind of messing with Ireland for 2,000 years, and how it's none of their business to be in Ireland, it's none of our business to be in Vietnam. They also talk about marijuana, and he goes, if I was president, I'd make it legal and tax the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, 1970s Danny Green.
Yep. One of his friends makes a comment that the country is going to hell because the kids are all smoking pot.
Right.
They don't want to work and they smoke pot.
Damn you kids, get off my lawn.
I just wanted to point out that Danny is like super into being Irish for someone who has never been to Ireland and was not born there.
Across the way from them is where the biker gang hangs out, and they're having this party, and they're doing drugs and being loud. And Danny goes over there and says, "Party's over," by
Hmm.
himself, just goes into the lion's pit.
Hmm.
And again, he is threatened with people going into his house and taking advantage of his wife.
Yeah,
And
poor Joan. Why is
what
she
the, yeah,
involved in all this all the time?
yeah.
She's not doing anything.
No, she's just existing. But yeah, he's like, I'll knock out your teeth, take advantage of your wife, whatever, steal from you.
Hmm.
So yeah, I totally get how he goes back to his cookout, and then his friends and him go across the street again with pipes and bats and
Hmm.
physically break up the party. Doesn't
Right.
look like they hurt anybody. I think they just smash all their stuff. You just kind of hear a bunch of noise because then
Yeah.
we see the leader and Danny squaring up in the street. So I
Yes.
think it was like they broke up the party and it became a one-on-one leader versus leader type deal.
Well, but Danny ends up beating the absolute shit out of him because you see like blood flying everywhere. Like, I was really scared that he was gonna beat this guy to death and just, like, get in more trouble.
Hmm.
But, also, while this is all happening, Joan and the kids are just in the street watching it happen.
The whole neighborhood's watching at this point. Joan does not look happy.
Yeah, no. But also she, like, brought the children out into the street to watch it, so, like, I can understand being aware of what's going on, but, like, just, keep the kids in the house. I don't know.
So then there's some other big boss mobster guy here, and Green and Nardi go to talk to him. It is implied that Danny Green has kind of mentioned to Nardi about how good hauling garbage could be, it
Mhm.
seems. And they give that to his boss as like a proposition. And of course, they want to, strong arm not
Mhm.
only the man who owns his business, but then also Nardi and Green. Like, oh, you came to me with this, but I'm going to take your money. And that's kind of how, I wouldn't call it a pyramid scheme, but that's kind of how that kind of
That's
works, though.
yeah. Mhm. Yep.
Um, so he has to go convince, his name's Mike, the garbage man, that he's going to sell to the mob.
Mhm.
And Mike does not take this lightly. He says he built this company himself from the ground up. He's not giving anything away.
Mhm.
He's not paying them for protection. He's not doing this, not doing that.
Yeah. I wanna make just a few points about Mike's life here. So, yeah, like you said, he had started his own garbage business. He's the one that originally, like, put this idea in Danny's head about garbage being a good business to get into. I did not realize that they were, like, this friendly with each other. I thought Danny was just one day having a brief talk with his garbage collector. But then when he goes to visit Mike, the garbage guy, at his home, Mike's like gushing about his family. He also says something about maybe like not originally wanting kids, but it's great. Like he loves it. And he says his wife is still a hot salami.
Something like that.
I like
Um,
the little context clues so you know people's ethnicities in this movie.
hmm
Danny likes
yeah.
green. Mike talks about salami in reference to his wife. But yes, Mike gets very upset when he realizes Danny's trying to get him to join this, like, they call it a union.
hmm
And maybe I'm not understanding. Maybe like the unions were kind of intertwined with the mob at this time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Mike wants to keep running his business independently. He doesn't want any part of this.
There's I think, scene intercut here right before, like after he beats up that guy, he talks to one of his neighbors, a little Irish lady,
Yeah.
and
It
she
was
kind of,
definitely like from Ireland, like with an
oh yeah,
accent.
yes, yes, and she gives him shit, says, "I know who you are, I know what you are," and kind of turns her back on him, like, you're no good.
Yeah.
And then we see that he's not quite threatening Mike, but he's saying, "Yeah, the mob wants this, and they're gonna take it from you."
Mhm. Yes.
But he tries to make peace, tries to be the peacekeeper here, and goes back to the mob and says, Mike doesn't want to sell. And he says it like so casually, like, oh, nothing's going to happen. I don't know if he's naive or hopeful or
Yes,
dumb.
yeah.
But the mom's like, well, then you got to go kill him. What are you talking about? Go kill him. What do you mean he's not going to sell? That
Yeah.
doesn't sit well with the mob. And
Well, they literally say, like, "Well, if you let him say no, like, everyone else is gonna do the same thing."
right, yeah, strong
Mhm.
arm mentality.
I wanted to point out that when they're explaining to Danny, like, "No, you really are gonna have to go kill this Mike guy," Danny's like, "He has 10 kids," like, as a reason to not kill him.
So he's got a bunch of kids, and he sticks up for Mike. Says he's a good father. He doesn't want to do it. Nardi convinces him that he has to,
Yeah.
even though John Nardi kind of sticks up for Green in this scene and says, "Well, can you get somebody else to do it?" It's like, nope, he has to do it. But Danny gets a
Mhm.
call from, like, I guess is the guy he's been informing to, the FBI guy, and he
Yeah.
says that Art, his friend from before,
Mhm.
was busted. I think he was stealing
He was stealing a Mercedes in Shaker Heights.
in Shaker Heights,
Yep.
and also has gambling debts.
Yes.
So you can imagine Danny Green's frustration when he was promised he would never gamble again. But
Mhm.
also, this really is the catalyst to him getting deeper and deeper in
Yep.
this mob situation with the feds having to go kill this man who has 10 children. So
Yeah.
now, like, they're not even thinking about Mike. They were planning to bomb Mike's car,
Mhm.
and they had planned to do it on a Friday. He
Mhm.
gets this call and he changes his plans.
Mhm.
And Art, who seemed to be in on the Mike killing,
Mhm.
was very confused why the plans change all of a sudden. And they make Art plant the bomb. And as
Mhm.
he's planting it, they detonate it,
Yeah.
killing Art in the process and not killing Mike.
You can tell something's going on because Art comes by all, like, happy-go-lucky, like nothing's happened with his, arrest or whatever. He doesn't mention anything about it, and Danny's just very somber, like, "We're doing it tonight." And he's like,
Hmm.
"Why tonight? Like, I think it's Halloween." And he's like, "I thought we were gonna go a different night." And he's like, "No, we're doing it tonight." And the whole time, Danny is in the car with Billy and another guy that they've picked up to be part of their
I believe his name is Keith.
he was
I
like
know him as Bullet Tooth Tony from
okay.
Snatch. I will always think of him as Bullet Tooth Tony.
Oh, gotcha.
Vinny Jones is the actor's name.
The 3 of them are in the car watching Art place the bomb. Obviously, I could tell something's going on. They changed the plan somehow. But then you hear them talking about, like, "Danny, are you sure? Are you sure we should do this?" And Danny makes a comment like, "We have to because Art's gonna snitch," or something like that. So I guess they're worried that Art will rat them out because he's in trouble with the cops now.
I mean, because Danny himself arrested and let go with a
Mhm.
promise to inform. So
Mhm.
there's that. Art was like very happy to have just gotten arrested, although I don't think they know that. Danny does because this guy told him his
Mhm.
FBI connection. But yeah, so there's not only that, but I think part of it is Danny feels betrayed. He put his entire livelihood and family at risk
Mhm.
for Art and his gambling problems, and this
Yeah.
is the thanks he gets. Fool me once, shame on you. Don't get fooled again.
I did like when they're sitting in the car watching him place the bomb. And I guess just to, like, clarify for people like me who maybe weren't sure what was happening, Danny's sitting in the driver's seat watching Art, and he's like, "You said you wouldn't gamble anymore, Art."
Oh yeah, he does say that. It's so stupid.
It sounds like such a soap opera type of line, like, he says it so like, it's such an obvious thing that we didn't need, but then also the way it's delivered is, like, very unconvincing to me.
Yeah, all that I was saying about him being mad, I had picked up on before that line, and then he says a line like, "Oh well, I guess if I did miss it." It's like one of those
Mhm.
things we didn't need to hear, but is what it is.
Like you said, they detonated while Art is placing it so that it kills Art. Nothing happens to Mike. You just see Mike, like, running out, yelling at them, like he knows it was them.
Yeah, as they speed away.
Mhm,
So obviously it was his car in front of his house,
mhm.
and Mike probably thinks it just went off on accident or whatever. Because how is he supposed to know they used his killing to kill somebody else?
Yes, exactly.
Next day, Danny is doing his daily working out at Municipal Park, and this car comes barreling down. He gets out of the way and turns around and it's Mike out of the passenger seat, just yelling at him, and he's got a gun. And he shoots at Danny a few times and misses, and Danny like one shots him in the head. And it was
Yeah,
pretty. Yeah, the papers say it was a lucky shot. This and that.
mhm. Yeah, like the newsreel calls it like a lucky shot. Yeah, the driver of this car is like pleading for his life. And I was actually kind of surprised Danny like didn't shoot him, but I
Mhm.
guess he probably realized he could claim self-defense. And I think even, like, the driver is that the other guy who the police are questioning even says, like, it was basically self-defense because Mike was shooting first.
It kind of was though. The
I mean,
dude just
yes. Yeah.
not saying that Danny wasn't supposed to kill Mike, but
Mhm.
if we're taking things literally, he was doing push-ups and was getting shot at. So what's a
Yes.
man to do?
Yeah.
Cleveland's PD Val Kilmer, he gets frustrated that they can't pin the shooting on Danny. I mean, we know Danny does it; he admits it.
Mhm.
We have a witness saying it was self-defense. He was getting run over, shot at. They have a brief conversation, kind of like throwing shade at each other about where in Collinwood did you grow up? What side of Euclid Avenue? And Danny Green, I think, says that the Val Kilmer's character lives south of Euclid Avenue. I feel like the implication there is he was more privileged or grew up a different way than Danny Green did.
Probably, yeah.
Um, that's one of the Cleveland things they could have explained to us a little bit better.
Right, yeah.
So Danny gets released from questioning, and Joan and the kids are leaving. This is the last time we see them. They just disappear. Not disappear, they leave, but we don't see them again the rest of the movie.
Right, yeah, we see leaving in terms of, like, they are leaving Danny. Like,
Yes,
the
they're
car
gone.
is packed up. She's had it.
She drives away, and Danny is rightfully so looks upset. But the shot's really cool. Follows the car as it leaves away, and it's either on a crane or maybe a drone. I don't know, but it pivots and goes up above Danny as he is slumped down against the car, and he's just one. I think maybe the only time we really see Danny looking weak, feeling weak. He's isolated and lonely.
Which I find slightly ironic because it didn't really seem like he cared too much about his wife before this moment.
They don't really show that relationship that much.
Yeah, they don't show it much, like, after his arrest. Like, I
Hmm.
feel there's a clear line between their marriage and his family life before and after the arrest, like, when they have to move into the rundown house and all that. Because I think they were happy before.
Yeah, it seemed to be that fight with the biker gang might have been
Oh, that too, yeah.
the cracks in the happiness there, or at least she was probably afraid of him.
She knows that he was involved with Art dying too,
Yeah.
because she sees it in the paper and
Hmm.
makes a comment.
Probably rightfully so scared of her life and her kid's life as well. So
Yes, yes.
all this makes sense. It's a cut and run. Speaking of cutting, we jump 4 years ahead. I like your note of it. Danny's looking rough.
Yes.
He looks a little worse for wear, at least in this scene. He grew a Tom Selleck mustache.
His hair's longer and, like, unruly.
Yeah.
Put on some weight, I think.
I mostly noticed he had like big bags under his eyes. They're walking through town, or the neighborhood, I should say. They're walking through the neighborhood, and we see these young guys like taking furniture out of an apartment building, which happens
Mhm,
to be the elderly Irish woman from earlier.
mhm.
And he pays her
Her
rent, so she's
back
not,
rent.
yeah,
Mhm.
so she's not evicted. And she doesn't like this. She doesn't want pity. And he says something like, "I don't pity you, but I respect a strong Irish woman," or something like that.
She invites him in for a drink, and she tells him that the Irish are drunks, fighters, and liars, but there's a bit of good in every Irishman.
Yeah, there's like a back and forth here because Danny at this point thinks he's a bad person. And she's like, "Well, you do a lot of good for people around you. You take care of your people." And then she goes into that line because she's like balancing the good and the bad. And she offers him this pendant her dad gave to her. She references that Danny Green has a bit of, or no, Danny Green himself has said that he has a bit of an Irish warrior in him. She says the grace of God is protecting him and all Irish warriors.
Mhm,
So we get a little bit into like some folklore, I guess, briefly. She says that he needs to put other people first and not just like watch out for his own ass, so to speak.
mhm, yeah.
After his wife left him, he really had nothing to care about.
I guess I was surprised she gave him this pendant because it was, like, passed down from her dad. I mean, it's kind of a family heirloom that she I mean, I assume she's grateful because this man stopped her from being evicted,
Hmm.
but she's literally hated him up until this point. But I there was something about protection with this,
Yeah, I
like
don't know if it's something to do with him being a descendant of Celtic warriors or if it's
mhm,
something with the pendant itself, but it does
mhm,
kind of get him thinking and change his actions, which I think start making him the local legend that he becomes.
yes.
We get a montage of him doing good around
Mhm,
Cleveland,
mhm,
including giving turkeys out to churches and whatnot for the holidays. We see a clip, a real news clip. Someone, teenager, said that his bike was stolen and then Danny Green replaced it. He called him the
mhm,
Robin Hood of Collinwood, which I think is funny because in real life, in that area, there's a street called Sherwood. There was a plaza, or still is a plaza on Euclid Avenue. But it has a very old school looking like Robin Hood icon on it. I actually
mm,
took karate in a studio there back in the day. It's not a karate studio anymore, but there is these little Robin Hood themes throughout
yes.
Collinwood and beyond.
They were showing newsreels again. I think they were at one point interviewing, like, shop owners, like, corner grocery stores that said he comes in and buys food for people. that sort of
Hmm.
thing. And they do see a little clip of his guys delivering holiday turkeys to the Cleveland PD.
Yeah, and Val Kilmer is not very happy.
Yeah. Probably
'Cause-
ethically, they cannot accept those turkeys if he couldn't even accept a beer from him before he was a criminal.
Mhm.
Or, well, I guess he was a criminal, but not like publicly known as a criminal.
And it kind of puts a little protection on Danny. He's doing all this good stuff. Like, how can the mob take him out? With all that good he's doing, Danny wants to go clean. So he goes to Christopher Walken's house and he asks if he can open a restaurant and Danny could run it. He's going to borrow money from the gangs in New York. So we're going
Mhm.
higher up the food chain to borrow money.
And this is all Christopher Walken's idea.
Yeah, well, he didn't want to front Danny his own money.
Right, yes. I wanted to point out, though, you didn't specify that Danny wants to open an Irish restaurant.
Walken decides to give him a connection with Italian mobsters to get the loan money. So then Danny's at this market and starts hitting on this girl,
Mhm.
and her boss comes out and tells her to sweep, and they see it's Danny Green talking to her, and he goes, "I'll sweep, you keep talking."
This girl's name is Ellie. She immediately is like, all right, well, who are you that you're commanding this level of
Mm-hmm.
this mix of fear and respect?
That's exactly what I was going to say, though, because he has the mob background, but also he's been doing so good for his neighborhood. So
Right.
there's this give and take here. Jump a little bit forward, and Danny and Val Kilmer are coaching their kids' baseball team together.
They, yeah, Val Kilmer's narration is back. He makes a comment like they kept running in similar circles and even ended up coaching, yeah, the team together.
So we cut to New York, and the courier who's supposed to be bringing Danny slash Christopher Walken this money to open the restaurant, he's using it to try to buy drugs and saying that some guy back in Cleveland just borrowed this money. So it's just kind of he's basically stealing it and he doesn't care.
Yeah,
They
he's
get
like, "They
busted.
borrowed it. I was supposed to give it to some schmuck in Cleveland, so now
Yeah.
I'm borrowing it," or something.
The guy he's buying drugs for him is an undercover cop. So they get arrested. Well, he gets arrested and the money is confiscated. This does not sit well with Green or Christopher Walken. And he says, well, now you owe them this much money that you borrowed plus interest.
Well, let's clarify, Christopher Walken is telling Danny
Yes.
that he still has to pay the Italian mob in New York the 70,000 plus interest, even though it's been taken.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that's what Danny says. He goes, I didn't borrow anything.
Mhm.
Like, he never got to me.
Yeah.
I didn't borrow it. The restaurant's not being opened. And basically, and I think maybe quite literally, he tells Christopher Walken to fuck off
Mhm. Yes.
and turns his back and walks away, which is, I gotta get the feeling that you don't do that to this character. You don't just like, not only do you not just take money from the mob and tell them they're not paying it, but you don't tell the
Mhm.
guy who is a loan shark, a known loan shark, that you're not paying any of this money back.
Right.
So now we're at war with this guy.
And Danny, to be fair, makes a good point. Like, this wasn't his idea. He's not the one that borrowed the money. He never got the money. And I feel like that's part of his character when he says, well, that's not how it should work. It's unjust, is what he calls it. And
Yeah.
so I I do think we're supposed to feel that Danny isn't quite so like ruthless and out for wealth necessarily the way some of these other guys are. But yes, Christopher Walken's character, his face darkens. I thought he was gonna like kill him right there, and he just like
Yeah.
turns and goes.
Yeah. Another point Danny Green makes, is that he didn't even hire the courier. That was
Oh, right.
that was his guy. So none of this should be on him. So instead of Walken paying the 70 grand to the mob, he's giving out 25 as a bounty on Danny Green's head.
Yes. And we see him handing this money over to some guy saying, "You give this to the man who kills the Irishman."
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he's just the Irishman, I guess, to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me think, though, if they killed Danny Green for not paying 70K, who still pays the 70K?
Yeah. My thinking was maybe like Christopher Walken getting this hit done is him kind of proving himself to those New York
Sure,
mobsters. I don't know.
probably.
'Cause, yeah, like, he had made a comment that Danny would have to, like, work off some stuff for no pay because there's, like, the 70K and the plus interest, like, he'd have to do some jobs for the mob. We see Christopher Walken's character dropping this money off, and then we see Danny meeting up at a restaurant with John Nardi. John tells Danny that Christopher Walken's character put a $25,000 bounty on him. He's telling Danny, like, just make up with him, pay her 70K, like, be done with it. And Danny is arguing with him that, like, well, he's not going to do that because it just isn't right. The whole unjust thing. And something about, like, not backing down. And John Nardi makes a comment like, "Is this because of the Celtic warrior shit?" Like,
Hmm.
he's really, I don't know, believing his own hype. That gets brought up a couple times, like, "Oh, is this because of the Celtic warrior?" Like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, we know you're a Celtic warrior." Although, to be fair, he does, like you said, escape death quite a few times, so.
Which actually brings us to the scene from the beginning of the movie all over again.
Mhm,
He's driving down, his car sparks, he jumps out. We see the guy telling Val Kilmer again that it was Danny Green's car,
mhm.
and so they start putting a tail on him.
What we see is that Danny's getting his car back from the valet, Danny and John Nardi, after they're done eating at this restaurant. John realizes the car is blown up, like he hears it or sees it in the distance, whatever, because Danny had driven a little bit before it blew up. And the John Nardi sees the valet like running away.
Danny and Ellie are on a date. I don't need a second love interest.
I also think this didn't really go anywhere. I almost feel like the only purpose she serves in terms of the movie is sort of like a false, like to throw you off course for a few scenes, which I will get to.
Yeah, I guess so.
But yeah, we basically just see them go on a date. They're hitting it off, even though she seems a lot younger than him. And she also seems to be aware that he's a mobster.
Yeah.
Questionable decision making on her part, really.
He leaves her apartment
Mhm,
after their date or
mhm.
whatever,
Yeah.
and his guys tell him that you know where the dude's car is because Walken's car is. So they hurry up and put a bomb in it.
Mhm.
A lot of bombings in this movie. Car bombings galore.
Guess I didn't realize that was the preferred method or something, especially because you had to, like, sit nearby and detonate it. It's not like
Mhm.
it was just a timer that went off on its own or something that went off when you started your car. At first, I thought, well, if they shoot a person, they have to, like, be there, like, be in the area, be closer to them, but same thing kinda with the car bombs. I don't know if this is, like, old school or if this is how things actually work, that they had to, like, be there to watch and detonate it. I was still kinda like, "Oh, well, so you still have to, like, park nearby and, like,
Yeah,
put
I think
yourself at the scene."
I also think though it sends a message because it's like a big ordeal. Like
Bigger,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a lot of theater here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One other thing I did wanna point out, they find Christopher Walken outside St. Malachi's Church, which is a
Hmm.
real church in Cleveland. It is spelled wrong in this
I
movie.
said the same thing last
Oh,
night. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Our version we spell it with an I, and the movie was with a Y.
But he's
But
also, like, not at church, he's just by the church. I mean, but maybe that is where it really happened. It is a landmark.
and he drives home just to like again one of those things to like not place him at the scene of the crime. He parks in front of his house, gets out of his car, goes into his house, and we have this awesome tracking shot, kind of following him, but the camera stays outside. So he
Mhm,
parks his car, he goes camera left, goes into his front door, marches through his house as the camera is tracking him still, and he goes out the back door, hops a fence, goes down an alley, and gets into another car.
mhm.
So if you're a neighbor, you can't place Danny Green at the bombing because I just saw him walk home. He just
Yeah,
went in his house, his car's in the front still.
I agree. I did like that shot a lot. It was funny because at first when Danny says, "Meet me in the alley behind my house," and then he, goes to his house, goes in the front, I was like, "Why didn't he just get in the car with them right there?" But yeah, smart.
Hmm.
This is why I
Yeah.
wouldn't make it as a gangster, I guess.
But yeah, so then we go to the church where Christopher Walken's car is nearby. The church lets out, and everyone's like freaking out. And there's a lady crossing the street who he helps. I think partly because he's trying to be part noble, but also I think he's trying to prevent her from crossing into the
Yeah.
bomb and be collateral damage.
Yeah, they are sitting in the car waiting for Christopher Walken to get closer to his car. He is not at the church, he's, like, at a shop front really
Hmm.
close by talking to someone. The car is kinda between Christopher Walken and the church entrance. This old woman exits the church and starts, like, crossing the street, and she's gonna walk right by the car, and you even hear one of the guys that Danny's with say, like, "Oh, shit, where'd she come from?"
Yeah,
And Danny realizes he very well could blow his cover if he gets out and helps her, but he still does. He, like, runs out, turns her the other way, and, like, helps her walk away from the car, and then I guess one of the other guys detonates the bomb while this is happening because Christopher Walken has gotten close enough to the car. Oh, no, he's literally, like, unlocking his car, right?
yeah.
Mhm,
So yeah, Danny turns her around like you said while he's crossing the street. He looks over and him and Walken lock eyes.
mhm.
So he knows right away, like, oh shit.
Yep,
And then that's it. No more Christopher Walken.
yep.
Then the current Cleveland crime boss also dies. And it's between two guys to take his place. Oh, we get some Val Kilmer narration again. They talk about who's going to take his place.
Mhm.
Person X kind of kisses the ass of the Sicilians in New York, and Nardi does not. They don't
Right,
pick Nardi.
right.
So he's kind of like the black sheep of the mob, it seems like.
Mhm.
So the new boss obviously doesn't like Danny. I don't think his old boss did either, because he just does what he wants to do, and he won't fucking die.
My impression my impression was the old guy tolerated Danny because of John Nardi's relationship with him, but the new boss doesn't care about Nardi anyway, so he
Yeah,
definitely doesn't care about Danny.
yeah, and he sends one of his guys to a bar where Billy's just hanging out, and he kind of asks him where Danny is, trying to convince him that it's going to be okay, that Danny's getting taken care of tonight.
Mhm.
So
Tries
then,
to get Billy to, like, join up with them, like, "Danny's
yeah,
gonna be taken out, so come work with us."
right, and it ends up just Billy shooting the guy,
Yep.
and he goes to warn Danny.
I did wanna point out right before this when they are meeting with the new Cleveland crime boss, the negotiations fall apart. I couldn't follow exactly what was happening, but it ends with Danny and his guys walking away, and Danny says, "The Irishman works for himself now." So,
Yes, yeah, that's right.
he
That's
refers
why they
to
want to
himself
kill
that
him.
way.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So after Billy kills this other mobster, he calls Danny. This is the middle of the night, wakes him up. The phone's ringing.
tries to
So
warn him that, like, there's a hit out for him,
right.
like, that night, yeah.
So he leaves his bedroom. The phone is somewhere in the upstairs hallway, which is very convenient because when he goes to pick up the phone, he has a view of his lower level of his house or apartment or whatever, and that's he sees a bomb getting thrown into his house.
Mhm.
So somehow him and Ellie are safe. He sees it just in time, and the house literally collapses, and
Yeah,
they
the
don't die
house
somehow.
so, yeah, he sees the bomb get thrown in. It's enough time for him to basically run back, and I think he, like, is able to cover Ellie with his body,
Yes.
but you see from the outside, like, the house collapses in half.
Hmm.
The only thing I can think of is they were in that back half of the house that didn't it's more like the front collapses, and maybe that's
Sure.
how they survived. I'm
Yeah.
really shocked because they even have a little scene of, like, the Italian mob being like, "What the hell? Like, how did you not get him?" And the guy's like, "I don't know, we missed." And he's like, "You missed? You blew up his house." Like
Right. Yes. Yeah. Later on, after Danny licks his very minor wounds from his house imploding on him, he's talking to Billy. They're talking about how they offered Billy to be Judas,
Mhm,
and Danny is like, "Oh, apparently that guy, we found him in the bottom of Lake Erie with that old sink he used to carry around. Whatever happened to that sink?"
mm,
And there was like a little moment where it seems like Danny's testing them, but he also knows the loyalty Billy has, and they
mhm.
embrace. But
Yeah.
it's just funny how they were saying it just in case they're being overheard or watched. But he's basically thanking Billy for giving him the warning and not turning on him.
Yeah, because he definitely had the opportunity to. But then we cut to Danny's working out in another park, different one this time,
Hmm.
and is shot at again.
And the guy misses. He's got like a sniper rifle or something. He's just a horrible shot.
Yeah, it seems that way.
And then Danny actually chases him down. Like
Mhm.
he doesn't get up to him because he gets in the car, drives away. But the other guy is more afraid than Danny is.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
got this little six shooter, and the hitman has a long range rifle,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
just disappears.
There's a news interview about this, isn't there? We see him, like, being
Oh yeah,
interviewed because, like, whatever, the press gets wind of this, and they literally interview him, like, at the park, and he's just like, "Yeah, sure, come get me, and, like, make sure you get a shot of my house and where I live now, and, like, this is where my old house used to be. This is the trailer where I work on that land." Like
yeah. He gives zero, what's
Mhm.
here, and
Yeah.
he's just balls to the wall, calling them out like, "Hey, you tried, you missed. You tried, you missed. Come on, try again."
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We cut to John Nardi meeting with Danny, like, I don't know, like, under a bridge or something, like, some, like,
He's
kinda
in a parking garage.
okay, yeah, like, I just remember thinking this is, like, a sufficiently shady location, but basically, Nardi is promising Danny that he's not gonna turn on him. He opens his trunk, and I did even though it's kinda gross, I did kinda like this. The way they have the scene set up, John Nardi's car is parked in front of Danny's, I think, and then they're talking kinda, like, between the cars, and so that they're at the trunk of John Nardi's car. Nardi is putting on like, slowly as he's talking, like, putting on gloves and then glasses, like, kinda protective glasses, and I as soon as he put on the glasses, I think that's when I understood what was going on, but he opens his trunk, shows Danny that the valet that planted the car bomb from earlier is tied up in his trunk. Nardi stabs him a few times in front of Danny and is like, "Now you know, like, I'm loyal
Yeah,
to you."
we offers him a partnership too.
Oh, right, yes.
But it's so funny. Well, maybe funny is not the right word, but how nonchalant he goes in murdering this guy. There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
big theatric here. He opens the trunk. There's a shot of the valet from the restaurant, because he's in his uniform,
Mhm.
tied up, and then it cuts back to the two gentlemen outside the car, and he just starts like casually stabbing him. There was nothing like, "What did you do?" and threatening him or anything like that. It's just, "Hey, I got you a present
Mhm.
with a big ribbon on it."
Yeah, we cut to, like, basically a montage where Danny and John Nardi are just taking out mafia members one by one.
Oh yeah, there's a news report saying there were 36 car bombings that summer.
Yeah, which is insane.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think when this movie came out, I asked my dad about it, and he says that he doesn't know if the number is correct, but there was quite a bit. He does remember that. This is 75 because he died in what 77, I think. October 6th, 77. I think he died. So maybe it was the summer of 77. Either way, that was a real thing. Car bombings everywhere.
We cut to Danny in Ellie's apartment. He's, like, basically trying to shore up her apartment and make it safer. He's installing, like, a thicker door.
Yeah, it's almost like a safe room type deal. He gives her a ring, a cloud ring. He
Mhm,
explains it to her. It's got the crown for loyalty, I think, the heart for
mhm,
love, and the hands for friendship. And if you wear it a certain way, it means you're free. If you wear it facing you, it means you're taken.
mhm,
And he tells her to think about it.
mhm,
Don't put it on, think about it. And he
mhm,
just leaves.
mhm.
He also mentions that he wants to leave Cleveland.
Yes.
After destroying the mafia, I feel like he just obviously he doesn't feel safe still because they're making her apartment secure.
Yeah, like, I was surprised about that I guess m he's less interested in controlling the territory and he just wanted his revenge.
While that's happening, we see the new Cleveland crime boss. I don't know if he goes to New York or New York comes to him, but he's meeting with the New York boss.
Mhm,
They're trying to figure out where this money, why they haven't paid back the money yet. Christopher Walken's dead. Danny Green is not dead. Why is Danny
mhm.
Green not dead? How come you can't kill him?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we're going to need an outside professional here. And they like call in a favor from LA, I guess. That's where this hitman's from.
Yeah, you see some of them go to LA to, like, hire a hitman. I did kind of like this part, though, when there's some, like, young loudmouth guy, and because they even have to tell him to shut up when they're in this meeting, right?
Yeah.
And when they meet the hitman in LA, they're in a parked car, the hitman gets into the back, they make their deal, whatever. The loudmouth young guy says something like, "What are you gonna do? Just walk up to Danny Green and say, like, 'I'm here to kill you,' and then shoot him?" And the hitman responds by taking out his gun saying, "I'm here to kill you," and he kills this kid.
So this kid actually, the loudmouth, he was a loudmouth at a meeting with Danny and the Cleveland crime boss. He's asking for $2 million to disappear. He wants to move to
Mm,
Texas, start a cattle farm,
mhm.
but also unionize it and send proceeds back to Cleveland because they're like, well, why would we give you $2 million to go away when we can kill you? And that's when the loudmouth kid goes,
Mm.
I'll take him out back right now and kill him. And the guy's like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Yes, I remember
Like,
this now.
it's like he could easily like take care of it. He's like, no, that's not how we do things.
Yeah,
And that's when they go behind his back and get the guy from LA, and that young punk gets got.
yeah,
But it's funny because Danny wants to leave and he needs the money to do it because he never has money.
yeah,
But he's trying to, I wouldn't say bribe or blackmail. He's trying to get them to get money, so he'll give them more money. I believe it was
yeah,
$5 million in return of profit. So
mhm,
double and a
yeah,
half of what you gave me. But it's at this point now, it's a matter of pride and revenge, and not money.
yep. I would like to point out that Danny, I guess, has forgotten all about his 3 children because he's just gonna go to Texas with his new girlfriend. To be
I
fair, he
don't.
might not be allowed to see them.
That's what I was gonna say. I don't. Forget might be a choice word.
Yeah, because like, not only do we not hear from Joan and the kids, we don't hear anything about them ever
Mhm.
again.
Nardi and Green are in a
Mhm,
parking lot. They are leaving separately. They're saying goodbye, and Nardi's car blows up.
mhm, while Danny is in the same parking lot.
Yeah, they're just like
Mhm,
walking to their cars, and his car blows up, and he runs to to see if he's okay. He dies, and now it's funny because when they're saying their goodbyes, I believe is it Danny that warns Nardi, the other way around, but they say like watch out, and
Nardi was
John.
telling Danny he's too paranoid,
Okay,
and
yes, that's right.
then and as soon as he says that and they say goodbye, his car blows up, and we see that Danny's other 2 guys are killed, Billy and, oh, that, like, boxer that
I think
is
Keith.
maybe named Keith, yeah.
Maybe they're taken out by the hitman from LA.
Mhm,
Keith is shot in his front yard by the
mhm,
hitman. The other one
mhm,
was more of a setup. They convinced Billy to go to the dock to make a phone call,
mhm, or
and or
someone's gonna be calling at the payphone on the dock to make a deal
mhm,
with them.
the
I
driver
did
gets out of the car, and then the shipping container next to the car blows up, killing Billy.
Yeah, I don't know why Billy fell for that, to be honest with you.
And he doesn't at first. He has to
Mhm.
really convince him.
Especially because Billy had good instincts up until now.
Right, right. So after Danny's friends die, his crew,
Mhm,
we see, I believe, him and Val Kilmer. They're on the front porch, Val Kilmer's front porch.
mhm,
Val Kilmer is warning him about this hitman, how he doesn't make mistakes. He goes after family, friends, anything that'll give him leverage, an
mhm,
in, an angle, whatever it takes to get his job done. So then we see Ellie walking into her apartment, I believe, and there's a little like guy in a one piece uniform, a repairman
mhm,
doing something at the apartment, and it
mhm.
turns out to be the hitman.
Yeah. So at this point, I assumed he was going to kill Ellie.
Hmm.
Yeah, because we like you said, we just had Val Kilmer warning that he goes after family and girlfriends.
Yeah.
Mm,
But what he's really doing is tapping the phone
yes.
because he hears a conversation from Green and Ellie about going to the dentist
Mhm.
to get his, he's got a toothache.
Ellie made him an appointment at a dentist in Lyndhurst,
Hmm. Yep.
which, for those who don't know, is the suburbs. Doesn't Ellie tell Danny that she's gonna marry him, or she decided? That she
Um,
loves him and she's gonna be with him?
she doesn't say. I don't think she says anything about marriage, but
Okay.
she says that she's made a decision, and we see that she has the claddagh on facing inward,
Yeah,
and I think she says she loves him, and they hang
maybe that
up,
was it. Mhm.
and then he like is like uncontrollably crying all of a sudden.
Well, no, he never hung up because he just gets overwhelmed and puts the phone down, and you hear her being like, "Danny,
Mm,
Danny," and maybe it's because he realizes, like, they're taking out everyone else, he's probably gonna have to let
mm,
her go too.
yeah, that makes sense.
But then after this, well, by the way, he's taking this call in the trailer that's on the land where his house blew up.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
he's really just, like, losing everything. Okay, so we cut to Danny at the dentist's office, and it's on, like, an upper floor because he goes to the window, he's looking down at the parking lot. Doesn't he see someone walking around his car? Like,
I
they show
bel
someone, like, near his car.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Because when he gets out, he is checking under the wheel wells.
That's
Check.
right. Mhm.
He's looking for a bomb because that's his what has been happening all in the summer of '77.
Mhm.
Bunch of kids show up on bikes, and they're like, "Hey, Mister, you Danny Green?" And he's like, "Yeah, whatever, go away." And most of the kids go away, and this one little tough-looking kid just like staring him down. And Danny gives him the pendant the elderly Irish neighbor gave to him.
Which
The
that was supposed to keep him safe.
and it was doing such a good job.
Yeah. What the heck, man?
Kid drives away, rides away. We see a van go by, and it's the hitman. He has a little remote control,
Mhm.
and Danny just stares at him. I guess there's nothing really you can do.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, the car next to Danny's car blows up, killing Danny. Danny checks his car. He thinks he's safe. Danny even like makes a finger gun gesture to the hitman.
Mhm.
Like, I see you, I got you. And I don't know, the guy has a remote in his hand anyway. Like, what are you talking about? Like, run. But I guess he feels
Mhm.
safe for a second until he's not.
Right. Yeah, I
Um,
wasn't sure in that moment if he was just like, "All right, I got," or what,
right.
but you're right, yeah, that I forgot it was the car next to his.
Yeah. The only way they were able to blow him up was by blowing up someone else's car. One of
I maintain this happened because he got rid of the pennant,
I believe that.
so
Now that little kid's an Irish warrior.
Celtic warrior.
Potato, potato. I want to point out in real life, I've been to this location, the medical facility where Danny Green blew up.
Yeah, I kinda know the area where this happened, and all I could think of during this scene was like, "This doesn't look like Lyndhurst." I mean, they could have still been in the city for all we
Yeah.
knew, you know?
Well, first of all, can you imagine like being that kid? Like you just get this like necklace chain from Danny.
Yes.
You ride your bike maybe 25 feet, and
Yeah.
then the car blows up, killing him. And they're like, just all these kids just see that happen.
Mhm, yeah, that kid's traumatized forever.
Yeah, forever and
Yeah.
ever.
Mhm.
So apparently, this hitman though gets kind of cocky and too big for his britches in Cleveland, and it led to Cleveland putting a hit out on him. He goes to the feds, and they cut a deal. All of this kind of resulted in major crime families across the country going down. I think they mentioned like 5 of the big mob bosses get
Mhm.
arrested. Danny Green and the Cleveland Mafia, they were the epicenter of the fall of the mob in the late 70s for the something called the commission trials, something that led to the fall of the mafia.
Mhm.
And then he says Cleveland Mafia has never recovered. And that was the end.
They mentioned specifically, like, the murder of Danny Green caused the downfall of the entire mafia in America. Are they saying that solely because the hitman ended up turning,
Yeah, I
basically?
think it's like a
Like
waterfall effect.
mm,
They hired this hitman. He killed a bunch of people,
mhm,
and I think he was kind of out of control. And so they put a
okay.
hit out him to like stop him.
Mhm,
And then one thing led to the other. He cut a deal. Someone cut a deal.
mhm.
People got arrested, and that kind of broke up all the crime ring. I don't know, it's kind of fun to see Danny try as he might balance being just moral, but also a bad guy.
Yeah, I like Danny as a character, whether it was true to his actual personality or not. I enjoyed him getting too big for his britches. Like, I enjoyed him constantly surviving everything because it was ridiculous. Um, Especially the house explosion, like, jeez. Yeah, I did keep thinking, like, basically none of this would have happened if his stupid friend Art wasn't bad at gambling. Because then, yeah, once he's in it, he has to keep going. So, yeah, it's all Art's fault.
Yeah.
That's where I am with that. I do kinda wish I had like the movie more overall. I was really excited to watch this. I You've mentioned the story of Danny Green to me a couple times, and I didn't really know much about it. I hadn't seen this movie. I don't know, I just couldn't help feeling like the writing was kinda cheesy. I mean, obviously, we've said it before, like, they really need to make sure you remember where this movie is located, where everything
Hmm.
takes place.
But maybe it's
Mhm.
obvious because we are familiar with the area, Cuyahoga, Lyndhurst,
Yeah.
and it's kind of our ears perk up a little easier because we know these things than other people. I'm not sure.
Maybe. I mean, I guess my opinion is that there's always some establishing of location, like in The Quiet Man. John Wayne gets off that train, he says he's going to Innisfree. There are ways to establish your location without repeatedly saying the name of your location.
I will say they do say Innisfree a lot in the like first 15 minutes of the movie.
Fair.
Like
Um,
especially when he gets off the train, he's like, "This is not how you get Innisfree. This is how you get Innisfree. Don't take that road Innisfree. Take this road." And I was like, "Okay, whoo, all right."
yeah.
It was just more rapid fire, I think, in your pick, and then it kind of tapers off and goes away.
Yeah. In that scene, it might have also been more of a joke where they're all just trying to
Of course,
be
yeah.
helpful and not being helpful. Like I said, some of the lines, I couldn't get over how cheesy they felt, like, "Told you to stop gambling, Art."
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I was mad. The line was bad. The delivery was not his best.
Right.
And like I said, I put these things together myself, and then they told me like, god damn it! Like, they don't have to tell me these things. I already knew it. It
Yeah.
makes you feel like a child.
Yeah, it felt very, like, TV movie of the week or, like,
Hmm.
very special episode of, you know,
Yeah,
your nightly sitcom. Did it hold up for you?
yeah, it held up for me for the most part. I like a good mafia movie. This Goodfellas, some of the older Guy Ritchie movies. We
Mhm,
mentioned Vinnie Jones, aka Bullet Tony. It's fun to see a story about Cleveland, whether it paints Cleveland in a positive or negative light. It's just kind of fun to get a little moment in the sun,
mhm,
albeit brief and mafia based. I think part of it's fun because go to the Beachland Ballroom for shows here and there, or Six Shooter, or Millard Fillmore Presidential Library,
mhm.
and those are the Beachland's like three houses down from Danny Green's original house.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's kind of crazy. Well, there's a bar down there, and they have a mock. I mean, it's a Cadillac. It's a green Cadillac, and they have a
Mhm.
mock Danny Green in the driver's seat, and it says Danny Green's car on it. Like that's kind of the thing they do. Yeah, it's yeah.
Hmm,
And then, like I said, I've been to a medical facility in Lyndhurst where his car blew up, and so it's not like a nostalgia thing because I wasn't alive in '77, but I've been to these landmarks, albeit on accident because of life happening. But I'm very
mhm,
familiar with his story and his surroundings.
mhm. Yeah, it really did happen in your backyard,
Yeah.
especially, like, based on where you live. Honorable mentions?
So for St. Patrick's Day, I have a lot of Irish American adjacent movies, I guess.
Mhm,
Um, Boondock Saints was almost like my 1A. Like I said earlier, I wanted to do the Cleveland based story,
mhm,
but there was a time in high school slash college where this movie got watched a lot at my house, partly for one of my friends would come over and just put it on at night when he was going to bed after a night of drinking. Just all the time. It was just that movie or The Big Lebowski for whatever reason.
sure.
Um, and then also like The Departed and The Town. A
Mm,
group of us went to visit a friend in Boston one year on St. Patty's Day, and one of the days that we spent there, we just kind of, I guess, had like a recovery day
mhm,
and spent the entire day watching like Boston Irish esque movies. And so there's kind of a little bit of a memory there,
Yeah,
albeit hazy and booze filled. But hey,
that's funny. My honorable mentions were Belfast and the Banshees of Inisherin, only because I've seen them and enjoyed them. I went with The Quiet Man because it was just the first one that popped into my head. Mistakes were potentially made, but
I like how Sean, the quiet man, is pretty much the complete opposite of Danny, the not quiet man. He is loud and brass, and he is definitely not turning down from a fight.
that's true. We'd love to hear your thoughts on our movie picks, as well as your own favorite St. Patrick's Day movies or Irish adjacent movies. You can find us on Instagram at Back Through the Lens Pod and on Facebook at Back Through the Lens. You can also email us at backthroughthelenspodcast@gmail.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. It's the best way to support our show.
If you enjoyed our show today, please give us a like and follow for updates on new and future episodes. Our show is produced by our hosts, Rachel Campbell and myself, Joe Siomick, with additional help and support from Peter Tellep of LPV Productions. Rachel, Peter, and I are also the executive producers. Our awesome logo is brought to you by Tom Faracci, and our wonderful theme song is by Matt Tarek. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more trips into our movie watching past on Back Through the Lens. No sleep and coffee. This is going to be a fun episode. Let's go.
Oh my God.
Know who's
Why
not the
are
quiet man? This fucking guy.